It's September 14th, 2023. Well, hi there. Welcome to episode 286 of Roqe, a special edition, The Uprising 1 year later. Any sense of delusion is finally and fully gone. We won't count on the West to save Iran. I'm Jian Gomeshi. Hello to you from Toronto. Salam Dustan Aziz. Durud bar shama. We won't count on the West to save Iran. It's almost liberating to confirm that the brave young souls who've been on the front lines inside Iran, putting their lives at risk over the last year and beyond, they will be responsible for change. And those of us of Iranian descent across the diaspora should do whatever we can to support those young women and men on the inside. But let this be a lesson learned on the anniversary of what we all dream to be a new dawn. We won't count on the West to save Iran. It's the 1 year milestone since the outrageous killing of young Mahsa Jina Amini, an event that would unleash an uprising that no Iranian around the world will forget anytime soon, regardless of when this revolution is finalized. Oh, it is clear that change will come, the inevitability that justice will be done, that the current regime in the country of our ancestry will finally fall. But it won't be because of the compassion and actions of Western governments and institutions. It may very well be in spite of them. We won't count on the West to save Iran. It's been such an epic year of emotions, a roller coaster ride for all Iranians and our devotions, catapulting from inspiration and a new global pride to devastation and lives lost inside. The heartache of watching kids pay the price. More indignities for Iranians who have more than learned the meaning of sacrifice. And it has been all about the young women and men in Iran leading the way. But there was also hope, perhaps misled, but hope of a new international day. Hope that leaders of governments around the world somehow meant it this time, that the international community would coalesce and make the Iranian regime pay for their crime. We won't count on the West to save Iran. But instead we learn that in Western capitals, lip service still rules the town, that our mantra must become, don't let the bastards grind you down. We learned that UNICEF wasn't there when we saw children die. We learned that the United Nations declarations and charters of rights are a lie. We learned that the Western media had other priorities. Would you like your virtue signaling sign with that misleading headline? Any sense of delusion is finally and fully gone. We won't count on the West to save Iran. We've learned that despite a new popular lexicon that includes everything from the sanctity of identity to proclamations of the importance of equality, progressive change, and calling out racism when it comes to words or tweets or political correctness, in actuality, the West is no more ready to step in and help Iran or any other country for the sake of democracy and human rights than the West was ready in the mid-20th century, or for millennia before that. For all the progressive pronouncements by Western liberal leaders, the foreign policy might as well be still out of the 1950s. And so we watched as hunger strikes, demonstrations, resolutions, executions did not move Western nations to put the IRGC on the terrorist list or move the human rights cause to the top of their laws. We watched as an American administration bobbed and weaved and lobbed and deceived without really taking any significant action against an Iranian regime opening fire on its own people. Instead, holding White House Nowruz parties with panache and $6 billion hostage diplomacy. Heck, we're almost back to that nuclear deal again. Why stop doing business with the murdering kind when you can condemn them publicly and say, never mind? Any sense of delusion is finally and fully gone. We won't count on the West to save Iran. But as the uprising rolled on, a heartbreaking but not surprising reality was unfurled. Iranians are not just fighting the government of Iran, they're fighting the world. And the point is back to those brave young souls on the streets in Iran. They didn't give up against insurmountable fire, and they remain our inspiration, our focus, no matter how things get dire. 1 year after the killing of Mahsa Amini, maybe Iranians around the world know that we are alone when seeking help on the international stage. But we see the light at the end of the tunnel of sadness, of heartbreak, of rage. In the end, we won't need the West to save Iran. The Iranian people have shown their resolve, and the bastards will be gone. Coming up, a big new edition of Roqe with a group of remarkable, prominent Iranians from around the world joining us. The launch of a new season. This is Roqe, episode 286, The Uprising, 1 year later. Here we are, back in the Roqe studio, Toronto, Canada. I'm here with Smart Pega, SPG, Smart Pega Ganji.
Hello.
Back for a new season of Roqe.
Yes.
It feels a bit weird because we actually did the new season preview last week. So we actually have been in the studio recording a new show. But here is the official season launch. And what a big show we have. It threw me back there doing an essay.
Yeah, me too.
It threw me back to the first 6 months of this uprising, and all of those emotions, even just doing this essay, were percolating back in my body as I spoke, you know?
Yeah, hearing it, I felt the same way. I almost had goosebumps just thinking back to the last year and everything that we've seen and heard and talked about. And
so much, so profoundly changed. I mean, so much happened that it doesn't feel like it was just a year ago.
Yes.
That Mahsa Amini was killed. I mean, to put it another way, or not even a year, I mean, a couple of days until the anniversary, to put it another way, this time last year, we, much to our bankruptcy, I mean, we didn't know her name, right? Imagine that. Imagine you lived in a world before we knew the name Mahsa Amini that has become such an iconic and symbolic name for Iranians around the world.
It seems impossible to even think about it right now. You know, as you're saying this, I'm thinking, I can't even remember prior to, September of last year and what things were like. And it seems like a whole different world now.
Prior to the conversations about unity, prior to the song Badoye,
yes.
Prior to knowing who Kian Pir Falak is, or Khodanur, or Sarina, or Mahsa, etc. Right? I mean, it's not only an experience over the last year, but it's a global collective experience, and certainly an experience for those inside Iran. We have wanted to do this season launch about the 1 year anniversary of the uprising. It happens to be our season launch is dovetailing with this anniversary, and we've put together quite a show.
Yes.
We're going to work through this over the next, it's probably going to be a couple of hours or more, because we have such, I feel fortunate to have these folks who've all agreed to come on this show, and we're going to sort of go around the world in the diaspora and hear from people, talking to them about their feelings, their perspective, their frustrations, what lessons we may have learned over the last year. I spoke about it, a couple of my thoughts in the opening essay there, but so let me just give people a sense of what they're about to hear. Coming up on this program in just a couple of minutes, actually. First up is Azadeh Rojhan. You may know, folks may know she's a member of parliament in Sweden. She'll be joining us from Stockholm. The musical icon Faramarz Aslani joining us from Washington, D.C. The acclaimed poet and activist, always so eloquent, so thoughtful, and so experienced in her own right as somebody who's in jail many times in Iran. Hila Sedighi joining us from Dubai. The great doctor, the surgeon, and social media star, Kayvon Mirhad. I don't even know his real name. Dr. K. Dr. K.
That's what we know
in New
him
York.
as.
I do know his real name somewhere. Mirhani. Let me look it up because I feel bad now. Kayvon Mirhadi. I was right. Mirhadi. Dr. K joining us from New York, was so instrumental. It's been played such an important role, even outside of Iran, for those inside Iran, giving medical advice, a lifeline really for millions. And he's got the big followers. The surgeon and social media star Dr. K, a comedian at Tehran. Tehran actually hasn't been on the show for a couple of years. It's nice to have him back on, get his perspective in Los Angeles. Academic and activist Forouq Canaani. who is a women's rights activist, particularly when it comes to women refugees. She's in Munich. She'll be joining us. YouTube star Bahador Alast. For those of us in Toronto, we know how active he's been, not just in social media, but in the streets. Broadcaster Kambiz Hosseini joining us from Los Angeles. Always interesting, his perspectives. Journalist and blogger Nikahang Kowsar in Washington, D.C. Acclaimed dancer Kowsar Abbasi in Los Angeles. LGBTQ activist Javid Jabari, who's been on this program a few times and who's also been very active in the street. If you gone to a demonstration in Toronto, you would have seen him.
Definitely.
He joins us from Toronto, as does writer and performer Banafsheh Tahirian. Always great to have her on the program. And finally, last but certainly not least, the guitar virtuoso, the composer, the musical genius Babak Amini. And not only is Babak Amini joining us with his words about how he sees the uprising and his feelings 1 year after the killing of Mahsa Amini, but we are premiering a new recording by Babak Amini, a new version of a somewhat familiar song with an Italian lyric this time. And I'm very, very grateful to Babak Amini for allowing us to do the premiere of it here on this edition of Roqe. I think he's going to release it in a few days. So quite a lineup.
What a lineup. I mean, as you were going through the names, I was just thinking, I can't wait to hear this person. And then you'd say the next name and same thing. I'm looking forward to hearing all their thoughts.
To hearing, I mean, as we get into the how are you feeling and the lessons learned, I'm predicting it's going to be a mixed bag. I mean, I happen to know a couple of these people are a little disappointed with how things have gone. I know there's some folks who are very positive and very optimistic. So it'll be interesting, as you say, to hear. I should ask you.
I knew this was coming.
Well, I mean, I don't have to ask you.
No. I've been thinking about it.
Yeah, I just, where is your mind and heart at before we get into all our prominent guests? I mean, I know you'll be there, as will I, at the demonstrations in Toronto on Saturday, and you have been there right from the beginning of this uprising, and before that for many years, president of the Iranian Students Association at my alma mater, York University. But how are you feeling in particular at the 1 year mark since the beginning of this uprising that's so uprooted, inspired, and perhaps also devastated our lives?
I think over the last week, my emotions have been all over the place. That's the first thing. I think, for some time, as we saw some of the protests kind of, lose scale, not necessarily lose importance, but just lose scale in terms of numbers and things like that. My emotions weren't as roller coastery, as for lack of a better word. And we had talked about this a lot at the onset of this revolution, back in September, October of last year. We kept talking about how there's these ebbs and flows in how we feel and how there were so many highs and lows and all of that. And then it was almost like all those feelings kind of settled in some way or another, and it was just go, go, go. It was, go to a protest and read this and write that and do all these things. But over the last week, I feel like I'm back to where I was, similarly to September of last year, where I was just emotional more than anything else. And reflecting on everything that's happened, reflecting on, the killings, the school poisonings, the, imprisonments, the brutality, all of that, seeing all of that, hearing about it, looking at, Instagram posts and articles and things like that, I'm just really emotional and somewhat sad again. I don't know if I'd say I'm disappointed. I know I had moments over the course of the year where I definitely felt disappointed, referring to your essay about the West and their lack of any sort of help. That part of it had been disappointing, and there were definitely moments in the year that I was disappointed, but right now I think emotional would be the word I'd use. We don't know, obviously nobody knows exactly what's going to happen in the days and weeks ahead. Is this anniversary going to produce, inspire a new round of protests and demonstrations and an uprising that will be similar to or bigger or whatever than what we experienced over the last year? And certainly, as I said on the show last week, I think part of that bastigi darebe, it's related to what's going to happen inside Iran, and how the regime reacts and how, what's happening with folks there. And we sort of
as we should take our cue from what's going on in Iran. But I do feel like perhaps in the category of everything happens for a reason, if you believe in that kind of fate, maybe the global community, and certainly those inside Iran who were understandably exhausted, terrified, imprisoned, needed a reset, needed a breather, right? And so maybe this is just the next. I mean, we've talked about this even before. There was the expectation amongst some that last fall's uprising, in terms of the scale when it was at its peak, was going to actually do the job. That there's going to be massive change in Iran and all that. Even before that, there's been the talk that this is a growing series of interruptions, of uprisings, of revolutions that lead to change. And so are we on the precipice of the next step now?
Exactly.
Or the continuation of this one,
Well, I think it's, you can't deny the impact that the protests and, everything that has happened over the last year has had on not only present, but also the future of Iran. I think it's the fact that, like we had talked about.
I hope so. I mean, I think honestly, I'm not saying it's in my opinion, but yeah. I think it's debatable. I mean, I think there would be some who would argue, we almost went back to square one, especially with the infighting in the diaspora and all that stuff. I don't know
if I agree with that, though, because even historically we've seen, right? If you look at the last 20 years in Iran, we've seen, protests and uprisings and all of this become closer together in time. So if you look at it, even in the last year, we haven't actually seen protests completely stop. In one way or another, people inside of Iran have been protesting, whether it's through demonstrations in the street, graffiti on the walls, women not wearing their hijab, schools and university students being vocal. Exactly. Yeah. So
even with the millions in the streets in 2009, remember, many of them were saying, let's reform the system.
Yes.
Now it's get the fuck out.
Exactly. That's why I'm saying I don't think we can deny the impact of what has happened over the course of the last year.
All right. We've got 13 guests from around the world joining us. Before we do that, a thank you to a couple of folks who have helped make this edition of Roqe our season launch. This program is brought to you with the generous support of Reza Ghazi and Green Flow Financial. Green Flow Financial, Pega.
Got it.
Multi-award-winning mortgage lending and brokerage firm with offices based out of Toronto and Ottawa, Canada. The firm focuses on residential, commercial, and construction mortgages and takes pride in its utilization of technology in all aspects of the business operations. Green Flow Financial. The founder and CEO is Reza Ghazi, and Reza is a bundle of positive energy and an award-winning philanthropist and volunteer who has given so much back to the Persian community and continues to do so. Thank you for helping enable what we do. Merci, Reza Ghazi and Greenflow Financial. And a shout out to Mo Rahimian, one of the first sponsors ever of Roqe. Mo Rahimian, his company Inshufin, based here in Ontario, Canada. Mo has built a solid reputation as one of the most trusted folks in the financial planning, insurance, and investment fields. Inshufin, which is kind of spelt like Insufin.
Interesting.
But it's Inshufin. Think of Inshu Fin. I don't know.
Got it.
Try to help. He started this company called Inshufin, and maybe as important, Mo really believes in giving back to and supporting the Iranian community and culture. He takes most of his profits and puts them back into supporting Iranian community films and events and art galleries. I mean, he is known for this. Mo Rahimian, he sees the role of community members in the diaspora to support each other, and as such, he reached out to support this episode of Roqe. A big thank you to Mo Rahimian and Inshufin for what you do for the community and for helping make these episodes happen. Thank you. We're coming to you on roqemedia.com. It is there that you can link to all of our platforms. That's our website, roqemedia.com. We are on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Instagram, CastBox. You choose. You can link to all of them from our main website. If you'd like to see some visuals with Roqe, switch over to YouTube right now. And if you like your Roqe descriptions and bulletins in English and in Persian, check us out on Telegram. If you like to support what we're doing on this program, either in the way that Mo Rahimian and Reza Ghazi have, or by simply becoming a Roqe member. If you're a regular listener, an audience member, we really appreciate you becoming a regular Roqe member on our Patreon page. You can link to the Patreon page from roqemedia.com and just press the support us button. All right, Pegah, are you ready? Let's get to this this epic show of some of our favorite guests and folks from around the world, some prominent Iranians, I should say. Again, stick around if you're listening, because we've got a lot of folks to get through. And at the end, we've got Babak Amini and the premiere of a brand new song. So here we go. My first guest today, is she ready? She's there, is an Iranian-born Swedish politician and member of the Swedish parliament. Azadeh Rojhan has been a strong advocate for Iran-related issues, particularly since the uprising of Bloody November in 2019. During the recent uprising, she was working diligently and very publicly to echo the voices inside Iran and across the Western world. And right now, Azadeh Rojhan joins us from Stockholm, Sweden. Hello, Azadeh.
Hi, Jian. Thank you for having me.
It's so good to talk to you, and so I'm so glad to have you as part of this special. Thank you for doing this. Azadeh, you're uniquely positioned, I feel, in Europe and in our global community as an Iranian woman and a member of parliament in Sweden. You've brought your experience and political acumen to the dialogue around this uprising, and I know that these are issues that you're very passionate about. What are you feeling 1 year later, and what lessons do you think we have learned as a global Iranian community in the year after the killing of Mahsa Amini?
You know what, Jian? I've been thinking about these issues a lot this past few weeks, because we are getting very much close to the anniversary of Mahsa Amini's death, unfortunate death. So I've been very much occupied with thinking about what lessons do we learn, and where are we now, and what will happen. And I must say that I have a little bit of mixed feelings about everything. In some ways, I do believe that we have learned some lessons. We have learned that there is a great power within Iran. There is a great strength within the Iranian people inside Iran. And they are also very much aware about that the situation that they have cannot continue. There must be some changes. And I'm also very much struck by the knowledge, their ideas, their thoughts, how much they are aware about their own situation, also compared to the rest of the world. I'm really amazed about that. And I think that they can accomplish a lot. But at the same time, I'm also a little bit sad about the lessons that we haven't learned. And those lessons are not, it's not about the Iranian people inside Iran. It's actually about the Iranian diaspora. We have all the tools, we have all the opportunities to actually come together. There's nothing stopping us. There is no governments trying to keep us back. There are no punishments for us when we cooperate, when we talk with each other, when we try to do things. But even though we haven't been able to do that. And unfortunately, in some ways, we have also been maybe also working, not that we are doing that consciously, but in some ways, some of the things that have happened has made the struggle even more difficult. And
like what?
Well, I mean, if you want to be the voice of a people who are struggling, if you see that you have all these opportunities to be the voice, to show good examples, to act in a better way, because you have the opportunities to do that, you have nothing stopping you. and you can't take those advantages that is put in front of you, then you are making bad examples. Then you are saying that we don't know how to cooperate. We don't know how to do things together. And that is sending very mixed and mixed signals that is not in favor of what is actually going on and all these opportunities that we actually have.
Let me.
Yeah.
I want to address your mixed feelings, and by saying perhaps a disclaimer that it's not like everything's over. I mean, we're sort of in the middle here of an uprising that is in many ways continuing, that never stopped, that never even started, was part of a continuum. And so one doesn't want to do a post-game analysis of something that's still in play, but it feels like this moment, this 1-year anniversary of not just the killing of Mahsa, but of the beginning of the uprising, is an inflection point that is also a reflection point. Let's look back and see.
Exactly.
So with the mixed feelings, I mean, there was a moment, or a number of moments, I would say, in the fall of 2022. Perhaps up until the beginning of this year, where there was a real momentum and there was a real sense of collective action and unity, and here we go, and positivity and expectation, perhaps naivete in terms of the expectations of how quickly things were going to happen. That did change. I mean, we have to be realistic, whether we think things are going great in the right direction or not. The energy changed. I'm wondering if you believe that changed because what was going on inside Iran changed. There wasn't
exactly.
Or do you think that somehow there's a dysfunction in the diaspora that led to that? Which one?
Because that is exactly what happened. Because the things that you mentioned that we felt during the fall until the New Year, something like that, it was us getting strength from the people inside Iran. Their wish for change, their struggle, and how they were committed to this. It was when it changed, and somehow the diaspora felt like we can be the change in some ways.
Right.
That is when this shift happened, where all of a sudden it was the diaspora, the Iranian diaspora, who was began
to believe its own hype.
Exactly, and like, we Iranians, we are proud people. We can never, we always feel like, I mean, we try to, this proudness is something that we need to work on sometimes, because it makes us a little bit, we believe that we can do everything. And instead of saying that, okay, this is my position, this is where I am, and from that framework, I can do this. This is my responsibility to do. And the Iranian people inside Iran, they are supposed to do this because this is their position. This is the framework that they are within, and they have to do this. Somehow we started to do everything. Everybody started to do everything. We wanted to be leaders. We wanted to be the voice of what the Iranians inside Iran thought, and stuff like that. And that is the worst thing that can happen, because we don't live in Iran. We are living outside Iran. We can use our platforms and we can use our voices to change within the countries that we are in, but also within the tools that we have. We are not the ones who should find the new leader. We are not the ones who should talk about how the changes should be and how the Iranian people should do.
But on that note,
I just have to say one thing, Jian, because I'm saying this and it sounds like I'm very negative. And I want to say that I am not negative. I don't think that this is the end. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that this mixed feeling that I have is also very much affecting how I want to proceed when it comes to these issues, but how I think that we need to proceed. So it's not because I'm saying that, it's all lost. It's a lost cause,
I
and
understand.
we haven't seen any changes. I really want to stress that.
Yeah,
before
no,
we
it
continue.
doesn't. I wasn't feeling it negative. I was feeling it
Oh.
as constructive, as wanting to actually be realistic about thinking about it, what has gone down. But I was going to say, one of the ways in which the people in the diaspora, us, wanted to be proactive was to and I think in the right way, was to look at the predictable consequences of the actions of our governments in the West, and the politicians and the political leaders, and perhaps there was some naivete again that there would actually be some action on the part of governments in the West. You are a politician. You're in Europe. You're in a particularly progressive country when it comes to these issues compared to maybe some others. But are you disappointed that when you see what's happening, say, with the American administration now proceeding with the nuclear deal, it seems, with the regime in Iran, et cetera, or do you believe that we should have all expected this?
Well, of course, I'm disappointed in the way that, of course, I wanted more. We all wanted more. We all hoped for faster changes and a new way of looking on the Iranian issue and see changes in the Iranian policy around the world. Of course, so I am disappointed in that way. But at the same time, as you said, I'm a politician. I know how this kind of things works. I see how, the Iranian policy as it is today, it's been like that as long as we can remember. It takes time to change that. And something that we also have to keep in mind is that there is the things that are going on in Europe, in US, the internal affairs in most of these countries, in the EU countries, Europe countries, in US, it's historical. It's a political situation that none of these countries have experienced before. And it's actually the most serious political situation for most of these countries since the Second World War and since the Cold War also, in many ways. And we also have the war in Ukraine going on. Of course, these countries are mostly occupied about what is going on in their own countries. The polarization within these countries, foreign affairs and the foreign policies are not prioritized right now if it doesn't concern Ukraine. And we can be sad about that.
No, but the delta between what they say in terms of caring about human rights and democracy in the world, the rights of women, all this, and what they actually do, that's the part that's infuriating, right? It's not, you can be realistic about
that. But I understand that. I understand that you feel that there is a big gap between those things, what they say and what they do. But the thing is that what they say is true. They do believe in human rights. They do believe in women's rights. They do believe that the Iranian government should be, should fall apart. They really mean all of that. But at the same time, when it comes to the doing of that, they don't have the time.
Let's release $6 billion.
They don't have. So of course there is a gap between that, but we have to be realistic. It's not strange, because what should they do? They can say that this is a horrible government. They are, they are against women. They are not respecting human rights. But at the end, what do we expect from them? What do we want them to do? Since we don't know ourselves what we want to do.
Well, no, we do. There would be some.
No, I know we know.
There would be some there would be some who would immediately say, "Well, don't do another nuclear deal. Don't release the $6 billion."
I do agree. But
you are helping us to understand why they're doing that. I'm just telling you why we emotionally react in a frustrated way, and you already know the answer.
But I do the same thing. I don't want. I really. I feel like I have to stress that also, because first you are a human. First I am an Iranian-born person. I have a heart that really is beating for Iran and for matters of human rights and women's rights in Iran. But at the same time, when I get past my emotions, I need to look at the reality, and I have to learn that the situation as it is today, especially internal situation within these countries, it's like this is really the worst time for this. So
let me untangle all that, detangle us from all of that, and ask you a quick final question, because I know I can't keep you too long, and we've got all these other guests waiting. Quick question. This, forget about everything we've just said in terms of the mixed feelings and all of that. This time last year, just before the killing of Mahsa Amini, and therefore just before the uprising that would lead to an historic sort of resistance within Iran, albeit not the toppling of the regime yet, et cetera. Do you feel more energized, more optimistic about the fight for democracy and freedom in Iran today than you did 1 year ago today?
I could never have imagined 1 year ago, this day, before all of this that happened, I could have never imagined that we would be where we are today. Never. I mean, I am so much more optimistic. I mean, come on, just the civil obedience that the Iranian people are showing, the changes that even that, just that the government needs to discuss these matters, needs to show that they still have the power. They need to show their the strength, shows that they are actually much more weak than we realize. Every time you need to show your strengthness, then you are weak, because that is building up a shield. So that is what they are doing. I am very optimistic, but I do think that we need to sometimes put our feelings aside and look at these matters from a more realistic way. So that is what I'm doing. It doesn't mean that I'm not emotionally involved in these issues, but I just try to sometimes just giving a little bit more of a realistic view on the matter.
Azadeh, Rojhan, it is always such a great pleasure to talk to you, and it's really, really wonderful to have you part of this special. Thank you so much for doing this today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for this show, and thank you to your team for all you do.
Thank you. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This dream I'm dreaming, won't you wake me up tonight? 'Cause this life I'm living doesn't really feel like mine. This strange dream.
This is a special edition of Roqe, the Uprising, 1 year later. Let's go to Washington, D.C. now for my next guest. And he is an Iranian musical icon with a career spanning several decades, marked by numerous hit songs and albums. Faramarz Aslani is an acclaimed, beloved, and respected Iranian-American singer-songwriter and guitarist, renowned for his poetic lyrics and melodic compositions. But beyond his musical achievements, he has consistently used his platform to advocate for a free Iran and raise awareness about human rights issues in the country, including many public appearances over the course of the last year. And right now, Faramarz Aslani joins me from Washington, D.C. Hello, sir.
Good day to you, Jian, and to all your listeners and people who watch us on this day. I'm very happy to be with you.
Thank you so much, Faramarz Jan, for being part of this special. You know, you've been very active this year, not just sitting behind a screen and social media, but turning up and speaking and marching at rallies and demonstrations and actions. It's been an epic year for Iranians inside Iran and around the world. What are you feeling 1 year after the killing of Mahsa Amini and the onset of this historic uprising?
To be honest with you, Jian, I'm quite optimistic. You see, in the past year, we've had big and small wins, both internationally and within the country. We must remember that 44 years of power will not go overnight. It takes time and unity. First and foremost, unity, and that is very important. Fortunately, in the past 10 years, the frequency of the uprisings have increased, starting with the Green Movement, and then with the burning of the headscarves and uprising against forced hijab. And then, of course, last year with the tragedy of Mahsa Jina Amini, they have all helped, to add momentum to this movement.
So to those who say they're heartbroken or they've given up hope because the movement seems to have lost steam and people have been detained and there are no longer millions in the streets and in fact we're on the precipice of another deal between the U.S. and Iran and this regime. What you say? What
you see? There seems to be a lull in the movement, but it is well and alive, and it's going on, especially outside of Iran, in the different cities of the world, especially in Washington, D.C., which has been, since Mahsa's killing, it has been regularly gathering every week, every Saturday, and that has been quite important as far as our unity goes and the cause, and gaining attention of the world media. That has been very important. And of course, against the dealings that you mentioned, we have also, raised our voices against that and let the world know that, we do not agree with what's going on, as
yes,
far as
yes.
Said the dealings with the country. Yeah.
One doesn't want to sit back and look at things as if things are over or we've stopped and we're restarting. The uprising continues, as you say. There's ups and downs, there's lulls, but given that we're in this moment, this precipice of the 1-year anniversary of the killing of Mahsa, which is a point of inflection, it gives us an opportunity for reflection, if you will, and to look back and kind of look at the year. So, in doing so, if you were to say there's a lesson or some lessons you think we have learned as a global Iranian community in the year after the killing of Mahsa Amini, what would be amongst them? What's something you think what's a takeaway for us?
The most important lesson, I think, was that as a nation, we can unite and get behind one cause. When you have one cause and one goal, which of course is freedom for Iran and the Iranians and the removal of the Islamic Republic, you have that cause and you get behind that. And that's been quite significant. That's been a great lesson that we did that, we achieved that. Different opinions, different ideologies, politically, sociologically, we've had all kinds of opinions under one umbrella and to unite behind one cause. And that has been quite significant and a great lesson.
But how are we doing with that? I mean, it does feel like we've experienced the exhilaration of unity, certainly last fall, this global sense of togetherness, and then some deflation of disunity as a community over the last few months, many would argue. You're not a stranger to the nature of the Iranian disposition. I mean, how do you believe? Again, what's our takeaway in terms of how we foster that unity, how we have to interact with each other to somehow bring this togetherness rather than carping at each other or different leaders of the opposition or whatever it may be?
As I said, it is very important, to put aside our differences, our personal differences. The most important thing is, to get together with one cause and one goal in mind. That is quite important. There has been, different factions which don't agree with one another, but we have to. They have to unite. If we have fortunately we have a society which has great, important, talented people, and in all different parts of the society, they can get together, and people can unite behind them. That is a fortunate thing for us, and I think that the most important thing is to put aside our differences, to unite and put aside our differences. That is the most important thing that can happen.
It doesn't seem like it's an easy thing for Iranians to do.
No, it isn't, because we tend to waver, but we have to come under the same umbrella and stand behind the same cause.
A final question to you, and a personal question. It's been somewhat exhilarating, actually, watching you this year inject yourself personally, physically into the movement. I talked about you turning up at these rallies and demonstrations and speaking out. Nobody would blame you if you just offered some tweets or said something on Instagram or whatever. Tell me about the decision you've made to be so personally involved in the uprising and the activism.
You see, I am part of that society. I mean, we are the same people. How can I differ? How can I not get affected, by what happens? When I see the atrocities, and the crimes against humanity that is going on every day in my country, when I see young people being killed for their, expressing their opinions or writing songs or singing or saying something against the regime, they're put into jail and they're being killed. I cannot stay indifferent. How can I, say that I sing for you, but when you have pain, I'm not with you. You see, we have to be involved, and we have to offer our services in whichever way we can.
And again, it's always such a pleasure to talk to you, such an honor to have you on the program. You started things by answering this question to a certain extent, but if I were to say, compared to this time last year, how are you on the spectrum of optimism around the fight for change and democracy and freedom in Iran?
Quite high. It is something that it is inevitable. It will happen sooner or later, because people want it. And we outside of Iran, we must unite. We must be with the same cause, same goal in mind. Again, forget about our differences, stay focused, and be the voice of the people inside of Iran. We can get inside the streets here, and shout, our displeasure, and nobody will arrest us and nobody will harm us. But that is not the case in Iran. So we have to be their voices outside of Iran. And it is heartwarming to see that no matter what, rain or shine, people will get together in different parts of the world and cry for freedom.
Dearest Faramarz Aslani, thank you so much for this. I know you were fighting a bit of a cold today, and yet you still wanted to soldier on and do this. You're such a gentleman. Thank you so much for doing this.
I hope I was focused enough with the problem I have with this cold, but thank you so much for having me. And Zan Zendegi Azadi, woman, life, freedom. Let's work towards that unity, and long live the young people who are supporting this cause.
Merci. Hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Merci, Elisa.
Drift are you like from ocean to
searched the whole world for drunken confessions and hijacked affairs. Will just make you more alone.
This is a special edition of Roqe, The Uprising, 1 year later, and let's go to Dubai next, and a very special guest. My next guest is a celebrated Iranian poet, a painter, and an activist who gained international recognition for her courageous poems during the Green Movement. Hila Sedighi was born and raised in Tehran, became involved in politics as a teenager, and her activism in Iran led her to facing jail time on several occasions over the past decade until she eventually moved to Dubai and settled there. She is the founder of a cultural center in Dubai called Mehroma. And right now, Hila Sedighi joins me from the United Arab Emirates. Hello, Hila.
Salam.
Salam. It's nice to see you again. I know that من میدونم که خیلی خوب انگلیسی متوجه میشی و خیلی خوب زبان انگلیسی هم حرف میزنی, but you prefer to speak Persian in these interviews. I understand that. So if it's okay with you, I'll ask the questions in English and you can answer however هرچی راحت تره, okay?
لطف میکنی. مرسی.
Okay. Hila, it occurs to me based on your activism in the past and your proximity to Iran as you sit there in Dubai, I know that what happened this year, over the last year, the uprising, the killing of Mahsa, and then the year after, had great resonance for you. What are you feeling 1 year later? And what lessons do you think we have learned, if any, as a global Iranian community in the year after the killing of Mahsa Amini?
ببین اون چیزی که من بعد از 1 سال احساس میکنم اینه که شاید گاهی اوقات ما ایرانی ها فکر میکنیم که از پس یک سری از اتفاقاتی که در واقع اعتراضات مردم که شروع میشه یا اکتای سیاسی مردم که به خیابون میاد, خیلی وقتا توی فضای مجازی هیجانی ما رو میگیره و فکر میکنیم که مثلا ظرف 2 ماه 3 ماه 4 ماه قراره توی ایران یک انقلاب بزرگ اتفاق بیفته یا مثلا به یک سرعت خیلی کوتاهی حکومت عوض بشه. من توی همون در واقع جریانات پارسال که این ماجراها اتفاق میافتاد و یه سری از آدمایی که به قولی تحلیلگرانی که تحلیلاشون رو همیشه قبول داشتم, اونا رو تو این حوزه آدمای متخصصی میدونم صحبت میکردم, همیشه در واقع میگفتن که به لحاظ سیاسی هنوز نباید مردم انتظار داشته باشن که تو 2-3-4 ماه آینده یه همچین انقلاب اتفاق بیفته, چون خیلی از زمینه‌هاش هنوز فراهم نیست. و خب الان که 1 سال میگذره میبینم که خب تحلیل اونا در این باره درست بوده. ولی از طرفی هم باید اینطور به قضیه نگاه کنیم که هر بار که اتفاقی از این جنس, اتفاقات شبیه سال 88 یا سال مثلا 98 آبان یا ماجرای مهسا امینی اتفاق میفته, مردم ایران یه گام بزرگی به سمت آزادی‌هاشون و خواسته‌هاشون برمی‌دارن و خب در واقع ما اون چیزایی که دنبالشون هستیم, اون آزادیایی که می‌خوایم داشته باشیم, ما اول باید به صورت فرهنگی اجتماعی به دست بیاریم. اون چیزی که من از تهران حداقل شنیدم و میدونم, از شهرستان‌ها کمتر خبر دارم, اینه که الان توی خیلی از مناطق زیادی از شهر تهران مردم دیگه روسری سرشون نمی‌کنن, مردم دیگه حجاب ندارن و خیلی از جاهای مختلف ایران مردم حتی شالشون رو شونه‌شون هم نمیندازن که بخوان بعدن سرشون کنن. این چیزیه که توی فیلم‌ها, توی عکسایی که از کافی شاپ‌ها, از اماکن عمومی و خیابون‌های ایران می‌بینیم, من فکر می‌کنم ویدیو و ماهواره و خیلی چیزای دیگه هم مردم همینجوری توی زندگیشون و توی خونه‌هاشون آورده بودن. این در واقع ما یه سری از کارها رو چند سال پیش توی کوچه‌مون, شاید اون موقع گشت ارشاد و کمیته هم نبود, ولی ما تو کوچه از همسایه‌ها و غریبه ها هم در واقع خجالت می‌کشیدیم, رو سرمون صاف می‌کردیم. حتی اگر تو خانواده و تو فامیل هم آدمای با حجابی نبودیم, مثل خود من که همیشه وقتی بیرون از ایران بودم به قولی بدون روسری بودم, ولی تو محله روسری سرمون می‌کردیم. مردم اول از همه این تعارف‌ها رو بین خودشون برداشتن و این آزادی‌ها رو به صورت فرهنگی اجتماعی دارن قدم به قدم برمی‌دارن.
Let me take your response in 2 parts. There's 2 things you said there. Let me address the first one and the second one. The first one, you said that people, Iranians, made the mistake, perhaps, or one of the lessons we've learned over the last year is this is not going to happen overnight. We're not going to see the government of Iran, the regime in Iran, toppled in 1 month or 2 months. Do you think that Iranians around the world, if not inside Iran, were naive or maybe got too excited about the idea that there was going to be a revolution that was going to happen very quickly, and that we've now learned that this is going to take some time?
ببین اینکه به هر حال اولا که هر جامعه به امید زنده است، یعنی ما باید همیشه امیدوار باشیم که وقتی با هم دیگه متحد میشیم توی خیابون میریم یا هر اتفاقی، به هر حال من نمیخوام اون امید رو از میون بردارم، ولی ایرانیای بیرون از ایران مثل ما فقط میتونیم ایرانیای داخل از ایران رو در واقع ساپورت بکنیم. ما خودمون نمیتونیم در واقع آغازگر اتفاقی باشیم. توی همه این روزهای اخیرم که توی فضای اینستاگرام و جای مختلف همه دارن در واقع رسیدن سال روز فوت مهسا رو میشمرن، 10 9 8 7. من هیچ کدوم از اینا رو نه میشمرم نه استوری میذارم، نه اینکه بهش احترام نمیذارم. خیلی هم اتفاق مهم و ارزشمندیه برام و همین الان هر جای دنیا که من برم و حضور پیدا کنم و یک نقشی داشته باشم تو اون ماجرا، لحظه‌ای هم دریغ نمی‌کنم و بهش میپیوندم. ولی من از بیرون از ایران نمیتونم واسه بچه‌های ایران تصمیم بگیرم و تشویقشون بکنم که اونا به جای من برن توی خیابون یا توی سالگرد اونا اتفاقی براشون بیفته. تا وقتی مردم ایران دست به دست هم ندن و یه جمعیتی زیاد نشه و یک جمعیت کمی رو ما بخوایم توی خیابون بفرستیم، فقط نتیجهش این میشه که یه تعدادی چششون کور میشه، یه تعدادی کشته میشن، یه تعدادی اعدام میشن. ولی اون چیزی نیستش که ما ایرانیای بیرون از ایران حق این رو داشته باشیم که بخوایم در واقع فقط به خاطر یک اظهار نظر مثلا اینستاگرامی یا توی فضای مجازی این کارو بکنیم. من فکر می‌کنم وقتی ندا آقا سلطان رو سال 88 توی خیابون کشتن، مهسا امینی و خانواده‌اش شاید نمیدونم، من قضاوتشون نمی‌کنم و اصلا نمیدونم تاریخچه سیاسی اون خانواده به چه صورت بوده، ولی اینو مطمئنم که مهسا دختر بچه کوچولویی بود که داشت در واقع کارتون میدید، میرقصید و هیچی از ندا نمیدونست. و وقتی که مثلا اون موقع خیلی از افراد بیگناه رو اعدام می‌کردن، اعدامیای پارسال، خانواده‌هاشون شاید از فضای سیاسی دور بودن. این خیلی مهمه که ما ایرانی‌ها بفهمیم که تنها نقطه مشترک کشته شده‌های سال 78 88 98 و ماجرای مهسا امینی، تنها نقطه مشترک این بچه‌ها اینه که هموطنن. اینا نه هم حزبی‌ان، نه حتی توی اون دهه و اون سال دانشجوهای مثلا کوی دانشگاه یا بچهای سال 88 جنبش سبز و بچهای مهسا امینی الزاما با یک هدف مشترک شکل اعتراضشون شبیه هم نبوده. ما تنها نقطه مشترکمون تو این 20 سال این بوده که ما فقط ایرانی هستیم و وقتی یک ایرانی با هر شکلی با هر روشی تو سالهای مختلف ممکنه توسط جمهوری اسلامی کشته بشه، این یعنی اینکه همون خانواده‌ای که امروز درگیر سیاست نیست و هیچ کاری با سیاست نداره، 2 سال بعد ممکنه خودش، فرزندش، خواهرش، برادرش یکی از همینا باشه، مثل کیان پیرفلک، مثل مهسا امینی، مثل خیلی‌های دیگه.
Right, but with all of that said, you also seem to be saying with the first half of your first answer that we shouldn't expect this to happen overnight. That this is a process. And with the second part, when you were saying you're seeing these videos out of Tehran and you know that there's courageous young women not wearing hijab, not even wearing a scarf around their shoulders, and doing this with courage and with their heads standing straight up and with the support of the community members around them. Is it fair to say that you believe that these are steps towards change and that over the last year we've made a big step? Because as you may know, there are people who are feeling like this was a great missed opportunity and there was all this momentum and now it's lost in the last few months. Do you feel like what happened over the last year has been very valuable in terms of change in Iran?
100%. اولا از نظر من اتفاقی که تو ماجرای مهسا امینی اتفاق افتاده تقریبا میتونم بگم، به قطعیت میتونم بگم بزرگترین جامپ یا پرش فرهنگی مردم ایران بوده. یعنی مباحثی که مطرح شده بعد از ماجرای مهسا امینی و سطح آزادی‌ها و مطالبات آزادی‌های فرهنگی اجتماعی که برای زنان تو این 1 سال گذشته اتفاق افتاده، قبل از انقلاب 57 هم شاید به این سطح و به این عمق نبوده و حتی شاید اگر به دهه‌های قبل از انقلابم برگردیم میتونم بگم تو سده اخیر این واقعا یک رنسانس جدیه و اصلا مهم نیستش که به لحاظ سیاسی مردم چقدر آزادی به دست آوردن مردم. گام بسیار بسیار بزرگی بچهای نسل جدید دهه 80 و 90 به این سمت برداشتن و مسائلی رو مطرح کردن و راجع به آزادی ها و قدرتی از زنان رو به میدون کشیدن که قبلا تا به این حد راجع به قدرت و توانمندی و حقوق برابر زنان به این جدیت تو ایران راجع به حرف زده نشد.
Hila John, before I let you go, one more question about one of your great concerns, I know, over the years, and particularly in the last year, has been the incarceration of political activists, the imprisonment of political activists, and what happens to them when they are in prison in Iran. What has this past year taught us about how the regime will use arrest and imprisonment to quell, to put down the uprising?
ببین به هر حال این نه فقط روش جمهوری اسلامی، طبیعتا روش تمام کشورها، ولی جمهوری اسلامی هم توی ماجرای مهسا امینی نشون داد که به وحشیانه ترین شکل، به بیمارگونه ترین روش. ما خیلی وقتا فکر میکنیم که به هر حال با آدم هایی که اونجا حتی بچه ها و جوانان ایرانی رو بازداشت میکنن، دستگیر میکنن تو زندان، و ما انتظار داریم که با یک انسان های هر چقدر سیاه ولی یه نقطه سفیدی ته قلبشون پیدا کنیم که اونجا یه خورده انسانیتشون بزنه بالا. میدونی همیشه این انتظار رو داریم دیگه. یعنی من خودم چون تجربه بازداشت شدن و درگیری‌های امنیتی رو داشتم، تو سیاه‌ترین لحظه و نقاط همیشه فکر می‌کردم اون آدم سیاهی که روبروم نشسته هم یک انسانه و یک جای منعطف میشه. ولی تو ماجرای مهسا امینی و چیزهایی که می‌خوندیم و اتفاقاتی که می‌افتاد، به نظرم ما با یه گروهی مواجهیم که کاملا سیاهن و اصلا حالا یا با مصرف دارو یا با شستشوی مغزی یا با هر چیزی تو اون فاز اینا هیچ درک انسانی تو برخورد منعطفانه با بچه‌ها رو ندارن. به همین خاطر من به شدت مصرم که این اتفاق به جای اینکه با فرستادن یه قشر کمی از بچه‌ها توی خیابون باشه، یه وقتی مردم ایران باید بفهمن که همه ایرانی‌ها، همه از هر شهر و هر شهرستان و هر سنی، از بچه 7 ساله تا آدم 70 ساله تو این خطر هستن که یکی از همین قربانی‌ها باشن. و قبل از اینکه واقعا این خطر بیاد سر سفرهشون و گریبان بچه خودشون رو بگیره، همه باید همزمان با هم دیگه به فکر آزادی ایران باشن.
واقعا خیلی متشکرم که به این برنامه اومدی امروز. همیشه یاد میگیرم وقتی که با شما حرف میزنم. I always learn when I get to talk to you. I thank you so much for doing this and thanks for being part of this special, Hila John.
ممنونم جیان جان، همیشه لطف داری به من و خیلی ممنونم که امروز در کنار شما بودم.
Bye bye.
مرسی.
This is a special edition of Roqe, The Uprising, 1 year later, and let's go to New York now. And Dr. Keyvan Mirhadi, best known around the world simply as Dr. K. He is an Iranian, Canadian, American doctor and the chief of internal medicine at Clifton Springs Hospital in New York. He's become one of the most prominent and beloved Iranians in the diaspora on social media, where he has millions of followers and views. During the uprising, Dr. K has provided essential medical guidance to numerous injured Iranian protesters inside Iran online, connecting them with trusted doctors in Iran. And right now, Dr. Keyvan Mirhadi, Dr. K, joins me from New York. Hello, Keyvan John.
Hi, Jian. How are you?
I'm okay. It's always good to have you on the program, and thank you for being part of this special. It's very much appreciated. What a year it's been for you. I know it's been exhausting and emotional, and you've done such essential work, and you've taken on so much responsibility for the global Iranian community and those you've helped inside Iran. What are you feeling 1 year later, and what lessons do you think we have learned? As a general question, answer it however you want, as a global Iranian community in the year after the killing of Mahsa Amini?
It's very hard to describe how I'm feeling. You know, a lot happened during those several months that I'm still trying to process with everything that has happened in Iran. I feel like overall, as a global Iranian community, we are more united. We do have a common goal, but I think we also learned our lesson. I think one of the lessons that I learned is, as a community, we need to be more accepting of each other's views. I felt like when everything was starting to happen in Iran, there was a lot of judgment, a lot of reactions towards one another. There was a lot of back and forth with people, especially on the social media sphere. That now that I know moving forward, we all have to take a step back and realize everybody has a voice, everybody has an opinion, and we have to hear each other out. That was one lesson that I learned, that we should not be so quick to judge one another, especially when it comes to these kind of like important events that are related to people of Iran.
I feel like that's something that so many people say, but it may be harder to implement in practice. I mean, do you have any ideas or thoughts or suggestions or personal habits in terms of how you dictate your tolerance of other views in situations like this?
I think when something happens as major as a revolution in Iran, there's a lot of opinions out there, and people try to sway each other's decision making. And if they are not on the same camp, they kind of ostracize them and say, okay, you're with them, or you're not, you don't believe in this mission. I feel like that's what kind of started the whole problem. I kind of felt the same way initially. And then after that, I said, okay, if I hear something from somebody that I respect, and I feel like it's not in line with my views, I need to hear them more. I need to like follow them. I need to, hear what else they have to say and then make my decision. I think there was a lot of quick judgment on most all of us, towards one another. And it just didn't make sense to me a year following this start of this revolution, that we all have a common goal. We all want the same thing for people of Iran. And why we bickered and, so much argument among us when we all had, we wanted the same result.
I'm thinking about the last year, and I'm thinking about the role that someone like you in particular has played and taken on. And I'm thinking about the connections that those of us in the diaspora quite literally have with those inside Iran, facilitated by technology. A lot of what we're doing these days wouldn't have been possible 10 years ago, let alone 30 or 40 years ago. But it feels like on some level, while we cannot take away the agency of those inside Iran to be determining their own future, et cetera, it feels like there is an ability for the diaspora to be directly involved in terms of connecting and communicating with those in Iran in a way that we were not before. And that was something that was realized, perhaps starting with COVID in the case of folks like you, but realized over the last year. Can you reflect on that a little bit, the impressions of what is possible in helping those inside Iran from the outside?
Yeah, it's remarkable, what we can use Instagram for. For example, I was getting minute by minute updates about what's going on the streets. I was getting images and videos, and I felt like I was there for like 2 months or 3 months. I kind of disconnected with my surrounding, regardless of where I was. And I think, the division that I was talking about initially, it does come about from social media. A lot of the posts that were shared, it swayed people to think differently of each other and started a lot of arguments. But at the same time, we can use this social media like Instagram to our advantage, as we're kind of helping people of Iran. A lot of doctors, nurses, health practitioners have been doing it. And even right up to this date, I know there's groups of psychiatrists still kind of helping the individuals that are involved in the conflicts. So we can use this platform to our advantage and to help the people of Iran.
How has the uprising of the last year changed your feelings, if it has at all? I mean, if you think about this time last year, before the killing of Mahsa Amini and before the hundreds of thousands and thousands that were in the streets across Iran and then around the world, how do you feel like the fight for democracy and freedom in Iran has changed in terms of the way you felt last year this time to the way you feel now, if it has changed at all?
It has personally has definitely changed for me. Before the killing of Mahsa Amini, for me, change in Iran was not drastic like this. I never thought there would be a time, like we had a family member just come from Iran, and she was telling us, there's a significant number of women, walking around with no hijab, with no fear of like getting arrested. Although again, like living in that environment does have its fears, but I never thought these things would be possible. So I am hearing some positive results from everything that happened, and I feel like this hope that we still have, a lot of us have, it didn't exist before before Mahsa died. And one lesson that we all learned, that this is not going to obviously happen right away. This is for the long haul. So
yeah, that wasn't an easy lesson to learn. Some folks got really excited that things were potentially going to change a lot quicker than is possible. A final question to you. I mean, I've been generally asking people if they're optimistic about the weeks and months ahead, but you've sort of answered that, and I thought I'd get a little more specific or hyper-focused with you in terms of doctors in Iran and the medical community. Over the course of the year, and we've spoken a few times, and a couple of the times it's been quite alarming what you've talked about. I mean, more than once, obviously, both the conditions in Iran for doctors working there and being found out if they're helping protesters, etc., and then they get in trouble, and so they have to watch what they're doing. But also you've talked about how there's been a flight of some doctors out of Iran. I mean, it's, given the conditions there. Where are we at with the medical situation inside Iran as we potentially go into another period of protest and as the uprising potentially continues?
I don't think there's been much done to improve this issue. And I personally know of a lot of physicians that have left Iran to pursue, like a freedom and a better life in other countries, and start from the bottom, go again through residency and try to go through the medical school. So, there is scarcity of specialists and physicians. There is medications, essential antibiotics, chemotherapy. This is something that I don't think there's any plans for the future to help with this. It's alarming when I have family members asking for thyroid medication from US because they can't find thyroid medication in Iran. And, I'm optimistic about change. I don't hope, there's any more people dying on the street. I don't hope anybody's going to get injured, lose their eye. But I stand behind people out of Iran, and I'm here to help them if there is another uprising. And we're well connected with doctors in Iran who are willing to help them as well.
Just as a sidebar, if you'll indulge me. So when somebody comes from Iran, more recently somebody from Tehran or something, and says to me, compared to say Canada, oh, the medical system's actually great in Iran. We have access to things that people here don't, and it's faster and it's more effective. Are they lying? Are they the top 0.5%? Where is that opinion coming from?
I think if you look at the wealthy individuals that live in Iran and they can have access to private care, maybe it's not too bad. Like in Canada, you may have to wait several months to get an MRI of your back. In Iran, you can get it overnight if you have money and you pay for it. But when we're talking about all the people that live in Iran as a whole, there's, first of all, there's no such thing as medical care where you can go out, get access to a family doctor, get regular blood work. A lot of people are just reading online about what they need to do about their health. There's no medical education. And for a fact, like there is scarcity of medication, like essential medications that people they need for like their cancer. But again, like any country, if you're wealthy, you will have access to medical care. So you're not out there complaining. But as a whole, I'm not too optimistic about the future of healthcare in Iran.
Keyvan, it's always informative, and it's such a pleasure to talk to you, and particularly on this special occasion. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much, Jian.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
The breath of the morning, I keep forgetting the smell of the warm summer air. thing. You watch your feet for cracks in the pavement.
This is a special edition of Roqe, The Uprising, 1 year later. And let's go to LA now. And our next guest is known for his comedy, his acting, his podcasting, his TV hosting. Born and raised in Washington, D.C., Tehran von Qasri is a second-generation Iranian-American with a unique background, an Iranian dad and an African-American mom. He holds degrees in international politics and economic theory and principal from George Mason University. He has always been an advocate for freedom in Iran, and right now, Tehran joins me from L.A. Hello, sir.
Hi, Jian. How are you?
I'm all right. Thank you so much for being part of this special. You know, I know activism is not new to you, but this has been, by any measure, quite an epic year for Iranians inside Iran and around the world. I know just how active you've been. What are you feeling 1 year later, and what lessons do you think we have learned, if any, as a global Iranian community in the year after the killing of Mahsa Amini?
1 year later, I'm still feeling inspired. I'm feeling motivated. I'm feeling ambitious in our movements. I'm also feeling exhausted, to be very honest. As a half Black, half Iranian, I feel like I'm just protesting all the time, Jian. All I do is protest. I'm just out there protesting. And I wish I could be attesting to the movements and the participation from the people. But the truth of the matter is, as tired as I am, I'm not nearly as tired as the people that I'm protesting for. So.
And the lessons part, what do you think? What's the takeaway this for the community around the world?
I think the lessons that we have learned here is that when it's power to the people, we can overcome the people in power. I think the lesson here is patience is a virtue. I think the lessons here are that we are all in this together, and ultimately the age-old adage of injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And we see this as the domino effect of what's happening in Iran has now once again been spilled out into the streets.
Let me pick up on that, the idea of what we can do as a collective. How has the last year changed your impressions, if it has? Maybe you already had these impressions, but it's certainly for some of us, you know, the 100,000 in Berlin or 80,000 here in Toronto, et cetera, was kind of a shock to the system in a positive way. How has the last year changed your impressions of what is possible for Iranians in the diaspora if we work together in support of those inside Iran?
It's changed my perspective in the fact that I've always been a fan of the Iranian people, but even more so now as I see hundreds of thousands of people around the world taking to the streets and speaking up and standing up against oppression. But it's not all good. It's not all a good takeaway. Honestly, I know Iranians tend to sometimes cover up the less parts. But the truth is there's a lot of bickering. There's a lot of infighting. There's a lot of people who weren't patient, and there's a lot of people who thought this was going to be an overnight thing, and I've seen a loss of momentum. And the lesson that I've learned personally is that I can't let those things affect me personally. I can do what I can do. I can't look around and wonder what other people can do. Ultimately, the biggest thing I've learned is that many times we sit around and go, I wish someone would do something about that, without realizing if we look in the mirror, we can see that we are someone, that we can be the ones who does something about that.
But I'm glad you turned it around there, because I was going to do the same and say that in the first 3 minutes of our conversation, you were giving quite a sunny perspective. And there certainly are those who would say, listen, September through January was amazing, but then somehow we lost steam. Somehow we balkanized as a community. We started the opposition started to, start unfollowing each other, both metaphorically and literally, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, now we're on the precipice of another nuclear deal between your country and America and Iran, the kind of thing that we thought would be unthinkable when we were out there in the the thousands in October and November. So
Then
how
that just lets me know that people don't understand how governments work. The same way that governments are not its people, governments work for the benefit of the government. It's the people that needs to work for the benefit of the people. The United States is working in its own best interest. It is not working in the best interest of Iran or the Iranian people. So we need to get that out of our mind. And that's a perspective that I've had as a person of color and a Black person in the United States, when a lot of time we sit around waiting for someone to give us something instead of realizing that we have to get it ourselves. And as far as it comes with the loss of momentum, of course, you spoke about January. Well, January is the top month that most people go and get gym memberships. And they get gym memberships and everyone starts working out. And January 1st, they're like, I'm going to have a great body this year. And when it comes around February, that's also the month we have the most gym membership cancellations, because people realize you can't just do one sit-up to get a six-pack, that you have to do 100 sit-ups, 1,000 sit-ups, 1,000,000 sit-ups to get a six-pack. And then once you do it, you have to continue doing it. That's how it works for change. Whenever you want change, you have to work hard to get it. It's perseverance. And that's something that we have to learn as well.
You know, everybody's coming on this show today and saying we have to be patient. We have to realize that this takes time. This is step by step. And I kind of want to call that out a little bit, because I feel like that's the thing to say now, but that in fact there were a few months there early on where very smart people who've studied this stuff for years thought that we were weeks away from the toppling of the regime. Were we naive?
No, it wasn't naivety. It was hope. It was hope because people are just that tired, and we always want to hope for the best. But sometimes we have to plan for the worst. And it's not just about preaching patience. It's about remembering it. Because the truth is, while everyone thinks this revolution was unsuccessful, the truth is the evolution was extremely successful. The change has already happened, Jian. It will never go back to being the same. It might temporarily, but in 10 years and 20 years, it will change. It will change no matter what. It is the beginning of the end. And that's what the difference is. Those same students that were doing the unthinkable, that were going into the streets, these 10-year-old kids that were cursing at institutions you would never hear them say simply 10 or 15 years ago, they're going to grow up in 10 or 15 years, and they're going to be the ones in power. And the change has occurred. So don't think of it, when we look at history, everything looks like it happened overnight. The American Revolution happened overnight, 1776. But that's not the truth. It began in 1774 and it lasted till 1792. And that was then, and this is now. So the truth of the matter is, it's not about preaching patience. It's about practicing patience. It's about staying the course, about not steering off, and realizing that slow motion is better than no motion. And as long as we all move in the same path together, we will end up in the right place together.
It's such a privilege to have you on the show. I always appreciate your perspectives. Let me give you two more thoughts before I let you go. One, something I've mentioned on the program before. There was a moment where I sort of thought, well, you were probably there. It was in that big rally that happened in L.A., and Reza Pahlavi was there, and he was kind of greeted as a rock star, and it seemed like a great day overall, you know. But there was a tone to it that felt celebratory, and at that moment, we were doing interviews with people inside Iran, some of the people who've been on the front lines, who were going, we need backup. There's nothing going on here. We're being imprisoned. The streets are being cleared. And it felt like there was a real delta between the enthusiasm in the diaspora. It was almost like we won the revolution, and what was actually going on in Iran. Can you speak to that?
I was there on that day, and I saw the crowd's reaction. And the truth is, it's anything, whenever you're in a bad situation, any little thing will seem like a sliver of hope. And that's what that celebration is. It was a celebration of people being together. And the truth is, I don't get into the politics of it all. I always remember the principles. The principles to me, this isn't about religion. This isn't about politics. There is no politics in persecution, oppression, rape, murder, torture. There's no politics in that. So whether people cheer a Pahlavi or not, that's on the inner workings that are above my pay grade, Jian. As a person who was born and raised in the United States, and someone who simply cares about my heritage. The truth is, all I know is that people in the diaspora will celebrate any little thing that gives them that feeling. What oftentimes in the United States people forget is that when immigrants come to this country, it's not because they want to. Most of the time, it is because they have to. And Iran is a perfect example of that. With one of the lowest diaspora immigration rates before the revolution and one of the highest afterwards, huge brain drain. These geniuses and titans of industry who are now the heads of Uber and the creators of eBay, they should have been in Iran right now. And that's something that is such a pain to people, that they look for any little thing as pleasure. So in the streets of Iran, what we need to do as the diaspora is we need to not become the voice. We need to amplify the voices of those that are unheard. The people on the street in Iran who are suffering even more so. We might be suffering from the memories. They're suffering from the present. And so we have to amplify their voices and not be the voices over talking them.
Gotcha. And just to clarify, I'm not picking on LA or the organizers who did a great job with that rally or anything. I'm talking about the diaspora in general. It was just in that moment
I understand.
When I saw that rally,
cool.
And it was on that day, and at that moment I thought, geez, we have to make sure we're in sync with the people we're ostensibly supporting inside the country, right? A final question to you, man, and if
I could just give a quick note on that,
yeah.
I do want to say that this doesn't mean that when you're in the diaspora you can't go about your everyday life, because a lot of people tend to shame others or guilt others. That's not the way you persuade anyone to get on your side. The truth of the matter is that I understand life. Just don't forget woman, life, freedom. That is what I'm asking. Let's not say we can't have celebrations or we can't have joyous moments. That's not the case. In fact, now is the time to have even more celebrations and joyous moments and have any excuse to come together. Any excuse to come together as people, whether it's a Seiz de Bedar or a Mehragan or a protest or a rally, and even better yet, September 16th, when all over the world people are going to take to the streets of whatever city they're in and show their unified support for the people of Iran. Whatever that purpose is, let's refrain from guilting one another, restrain from shaming one another, and remember that we must celebrate one another.
All right. Well, I was gonna ask a final note about if the undertone of the conversation is a bit about collectivism and unity or disunity. There was a moment, again, I don't want to sound churlish about this, but there was a moment, it felt like in, say, November, where it was like, wow, we've unlocked the key. Finally, the Iranian community around the world is united, right? And then by March or April, it felt like, oh, okay, we're just a quick look at social media, your Persian Twitter, whatever it is, not united. What have you learned? What have you learned this year about how you believe? I know it's a crystal ball, impossible question to ask, but what you believe we need to do in the Persian community to achieve greater unity?
Honestly, it's a very simple concept, one that is entangled into the fabric of who I am as a person. United we stand, divided we fall.
Right. Well, that's great. But the first part, united we stand, we're not great at doing that, standing united.
Honestly, Iranians, I've always thought this, the Iranians' best friend is an Iranian. The Iranians' worst enemy is also an Iranian. What we need to remember is that, and to be fair, it's not the fault of the Iranian. They've been disillusioned. They've been lied to so much. You want to know why Iranians believe in every conspiracy theory? It's because every conspiracy theory has happened
yes,
to the
Iranian.
I know. Every single conspiracy theory that you can think of has happened to the Iranian and the Iranian people and the diaspora. And so that is why they find themselves disillusioned. The reason why Iranians bicker is because they've been in many ways programmed to worry because of things like this. However, at the same time, the reason why, and I say this often, we can simply, we often talk about a history of Iran, so much so that actually it makes people upset. Like, why are we looking backwards? But the truth is, our strength comes from many things. Our history, for example, the Arab invasion happened all over the Middle East. It happened all over the Middle East, and it actually happened in Iran as well. However, in the modern day, when I ask an Egyptian or a Lebanese or a Syrian or a Saudi or a Kuwaiti, they will ultimately say they are an Arab. But Iranians never became Arab.
Yes.
And the difference is because we had a culture that unified us, a language that unified us. We had a Ferdowsi. We had a Hafiz. And ultimately, they did not. We had an identity that's greater than the sum of our parts. That diversity within Iran, whether it's the Kurd or the Armenian or the Azadi or the Baluchi or the Lor, whether it's the Jewish, it's the Christian, it's the Muslim, it's the Zoroastrian, it's the Baha'i. That diversity is what adds to the strength of the Iranian. And so let's not let that be our weakness, but once again, our greatest strength.
Nicely done.
And remember, we are the people. And those are the three most dangerous words ever uttered. We, the people.
Nicely done. By the way, it's above my pay grade to take a political position. I love that. You're like literally one of the smartest guys I know, but that's your way of elegantly getting out of a political stew. I appreciate it. Well done.
That's what makes me smart, Jian.
That is what makes you smart.
Stay away from those conversations.
Well done.
Those are conversations no one can ever win.
That's true. It's especially in our community. Thank you so much for doing this. It's a pleasure to have you part of the special. It's always an education talking to you. Thanks for doing this, brother.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. This is a Roqe special edition, The Uprising 1 year later. Let's go to Germany right now and Forouq Canaani. She's a PhD researcher in social sustainability and a women's rights activist. She has been fighting for the rights of women refugees and LGBTQ people for years. She's also been actively involved in the battle for change in Iran since the Green Movement of 2009 and has been an outspoken critic of the Islamic Republic. And right now, Forouq Canaani joins me from Munich, Germany. Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for your invitation.
So nice to have you as part of this special. Thank you for making the time. Let me start with the obvious question and the general question I'm asking everybody today. What are you feeling 1 year later, and what lessons do you think we have learned as a global Iranian community in the year after the killing of Mahsa Amini?
Oh, that's a very good question, actually. About my feelings, last year, I think at the exact time, I was totally hopeless. I was feeling that it's not going to be any change any soon, because what I was seeing was that alliance between like the European countries and the Islamic regime. And also I just saw this like behavior of people who were kind of, in my opinion, accepting what's going on in the country. And I was just worried, and I was wondering if they know their rights, if they know who they are, such a great nation, and so on. And then, bam, a couple days later, the revolutionary uprising started, and that was something that I can say right now. I feel hope. I feel hopeful, and I think that now people have seen what does it bring to just be together and just to stand for their rights, and how I'm feeling about it, and what kind of lessons we've learned that you just mentioned. It's pretty much obvious. Maybe it sounds like a bit cliche, but actually that's true. I think what we have learned is the value of unity. How important it is just to be together, just to stand for each other. And the most importantly, something that I'm still trying to promote is to understand it's totally okay if we don't think like each other.
Right.
It's totally normal that we disagree in so many stuff. The most important thing is that we agree on principles. We should agree that Iran must be taken back, must be free. And we are a nation who deserve better. We need secularity. We need no regime. We need no Islamic Republic. We don't want them, and they must go. They're the principles that we have to know, that we cannot just disagree on them. They are the stuff that we have to agree, and the rest should be just get solved through the discussions that we actually maybe have to each other, and then to understand that the differences are beautiful. Maybe that's so difficult to understand at the very beginning. What does it mean?
Well, I was going to say, let me pick up on a couple of things that you've said there, and start with the last thing you said about unity. You're not the first person to talk about it, and one would think, I would say, especially in the first few months after the killing of Mahsa Amini last year, we certainly learned how powerful unity could be. And yet it does feel like one could make the case that for the last 6 months, in the second half of this past year, it's been almost an exercise in disunity when it comes to the opposition, or in the diaspora at least. So how do we make sense of that in terms of learning lessons about unity and disunity?
Well, we're still learning. We didn't have so much revolutions. The last one was the Islamic Revolution, who brought us to this situation. Now there are like the so-called last generation who are still practicing the same, I would say, methods to make the revolution work. And we have like this new generation, including the Generation Z, who actually totally disagree with what's going on there. They are thinking differently, and their approach towards this uprising was totally different, even from my generation. And that's beautiful. Even the opposition are learning. Who were there? Most of them were just like social activists. Some of them were even not political. They just are direct to this reality, and now they just have to face to it. And it's not easy. It's a huge responsibility. And it's not that I'm defending someone. I'm just seeing it through my speciality, how it is. And that's why I think it's pretty much difficult not to see the situation black or white, but actually there is a spectrum between it.
Yes.
People make mistakes, and it's absolutely fine, unless it's a non-reversible one. That could be like something that you say, well, that would, but we're still not at that point.
I got you.
We're still seeing that diaspora, especially opposition, are trying to get united. And I think that is the only thing that we should get focused on it and just promote it as much as possible.
The other thing you said in the answer to that first question is, you said this time last year you were feeling somewhat disheartened, and one of the reasons was the ties between what you perceived in European countries and European institutions and politicians and the current regime in Iran. You are there in the heart of Europe, a place where there was so much activism in support of freedom in Iran. Of course, there was that massive Berlin rally. And yet 1 year later, there is a feeling that we're very much alone as Iranians around the world, and that Europe in particular did not show up when it came to supporting the uprising. I mean, I'm talking about institutionally. I'm talking about the governments. And for example, putting the IRGC on the terrorist list the way many had hoped. What are your thoughts on what we've learned now, a year later, about Europe in relation to this current Iranian regime?
Well, that's a good point, but it has like not enough reality in it. I mean, realistic point of view is that what could Europe do? Are we expecting, I mean, standing with us means that we expected to just bomb them, to just put them all in, I don't know, embargo list or something. We have talked everything with them and we got answers. It's kind of not possible. There are international relation rules that they have to obey. Otherwise, Islamic Republic gonna sue them. And it's a high possibility that the Islamic Republic wins when it comes to international courts. And that's what they keep telling us. And I am just sometimes surprised that I see that people actually ignore what they give us as answer and just don't take it serious. They said it's not possible. Just right now, it's possible. They can put like IRGC on terrorists, but they are going to sue them. And that's going to be like, again, in courts, and they're going to lose, and they're going to pay a lot of money because they probably have to the regime because, well, they did a wrong thing against these IRGC terrorists. So these are processes that we have to know that that's how it is working. And if we want more, we should just look at ourselves. They want to know when we are really rising for our rights. They said, we are with you. We also have enough of this regime. We also have enough of their terror, of their threats and everything. But we need to see the final move. Then we are at your side. I mean, we are already at your side. That's what they claim at least. But we need to see that you get rid of them. And then you see how rapidly and swiftly we're going to be at your side. And we're going to accept that, okay, now the Islamic regime is gone. And now Iran is freed. And it's going to be our new friend.
I think that's I appreciate that you're giving nuanced and thoughtful responses when there may be an appetite for people to just hear, fuck Europe. Why isn't more happening? But I appreciate the approach you're taking and trying to really make sense of things. Before I ask a final question, let me ask you just in terms of putting on your hat as a women's rights activist and somebody who's been active, particularly with women and refugees. This uprising has been very much characterized as a revolution led by women, and much has been said in terms of the role of women in the last 12 months in Iran. I almost wonder sometimes if it does a disservice to how much the role that women in Iran have played in the previous uprisings leading up to this moment as well over the last 20 years especially. Do you feel like this has been a watershed moment for women in Iran?
I think it was, but the very important thing which I really want to emphasize is the role of men. It's not that only the women of Iran know their rights and they want to just stand for their rights. In Afghanistan, it happened several times, but it didn't go anywhere because the men didn't accompany. But here we had this privilege, I would like to say, is that we had men who recognized our rights. And they knew that equality is the key of a society who's going to sustain in the best possible way. And that's fabulous because the Islamic regime totally did its propaganda against that. I mean, more than 44 years, we just heard totally different stuff like men are the main population and women better get home and just never leave the home and be the moms and whatever that the super conservative Islamists want them to be. And it's fabulous. I mean, I think we shouldn't actually forget about the rule of the Pahlavis kingdom. They were the first that brought this idea into Iran. They took the chance of the modernity in the Middle East, especially after getting the influence from Turkey and Ataturk back to the days, and they just brought it in Iran, and it was a brave idea. Do you know about which time we are talking about which era? Women were just like covering themselves totally, and there Reza Shah came and said, okay, that's it. We are not having it anymore. And I'm sure it was a very radical decision, but when you know about the historical details and the social situation of those days, then you can understand why he decided to take such a radical decision with force. And well, that was not beautiful. I cannot say that I like force. No one can claim such a thing. It's crazy, I know, but we are benefiting nowadays from that. And that's cool. I mean, as I just mentioned, white or black is always a spectrum. Something may look super bad, but generations after, you say, maybe that very bad thing brought up something to this generation. We know our rights. We know about liberty. We know about women's rights. We were the country who women got the voting right, election rights before Switzerland. And I think that's beautiful. And I think, yes, Iran's women, this generation who's educated, who's aware of, who's, it's right, the generation who uses social media and cannot be stopped by any regime or any propaganda or any force. This generation is the future of Iran. I mean, how much Islamic regime going to force them going to suppress them. How much is it possible? Look at the history. It have never worked, and it's not going to work to Iran, especially not with these people, especially not with these women, not with this man, not with these people. And that's the final destination. We're going to win.
You know, my final question that I've been asking people as we go through all these guests on this special edition is whether how they're feeling about the weeks and months ahead. But I feel like throughout this conversation with you, there's definitely an energy that suggests you're optimistic. You're very positive about the last year. Naysayers or people complaining that the movement has died down or all of that notwithstanding, it sounds like you are, would it be fair to say, optimistic about where things are headed in the near future?
I would say I'm realistic because revolution is not easy. We get people shot. We got young, beautiful people who got blind. And this is a social fear. It's not easy. And still, we kind of carried it on for 1 year. Even the people who weren't in the streets all the time, they're complaining themselves why we are not in the streets. So I think the atmosphere is still revolutionary. And people know that it's going to come up again. And the Islamic regime knows it too. Look how they're now so-called securing everything against the upcoming days because they think they're going to be uprising again. But even if it doesn't happen exactly at 16th of September, universities are going to be open pretty soon, schools, and that's going to be something. The first mistake that the Islamic regime probably going to do, going to cost them a lot, and that's what we are waiting for and we are hoping for, because I think people of Iran know better than anyone else the freedom can be achieved only by them. I mean, none of us can do anything by being their voices, reflecting what they want and work for them. But the main job has to be done by themselves, and that's give me hope, because I can see even the diaspora is getting together again. They're just like trying to. Of course, there are still problems, but it's absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. It is okay. We are learning. We're discussing. We're talking. We are learning. That's the most important thing. We're not stopped. And so I'm not claiming that it's going to happen next week or next month, but it goes on. It's going to be just something to be continued, and eventually we can see that we're going to win. Islamic regime cannot. It's so unsustainable what they're doing. It's so crazy. They just cannot go anywhere with this method and with what they are, with so much blood on their hands. So I think not optimistic, but just realistic point of view can be that that's going to go on, maybe not right away, but anyway, pretty soon.
Forouq Canaani, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for doing this today.
Thank you so much for your invitation. It's also my pleasure to be your guest anytime.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thought that never changes remains a stupid lie. It's never been quite the same. No hearing or breathing, no movement, no color, just silence.
This is a special edition of Roqe, episode 286, The Uprising 1 year later. Let's go to here in Toronto now. And an Iranian-Canadian engineer and YouTuber who has been incredibly persistent and eloquent in his posts and his activism for the uprising over the last year, Bahador Alast. His YouTube channel focusing on languages and culture has grown to be one of the most popular channels in the world with millions of views. Right now, Bahador Alast joins me from Toronto. Hello, Bahador John.
Hi, Jian. Happy to be with you.
Thanks so much for doing this. I mean, you are a very thoughtful guy who approaches these issues with nuance and facts. So let me ask you from the outset, as I've been asking everybody, what are you feeling 1 year later, and what lessons do you think we have learned as a global Iranian community in the year after the killing of Mahsa Amini?
Uh, well, I would say we've learned quite a lot, uh, not just about each other, the circumstances of what we're facing, but also as far as how the world affairs operate. You know, I would say the biggest lesson that we should take away from this is in this battle, we really only have each other. And that's not to take away from the genuine support of many non-Iranian individuals, because there are so many of them, and I greatly appreciate that, including many of my own friends. But when it comes to governments, when it comes to politicians, when it comes to organizations, we can't depend on anybody. Nobody's out there to help us, and we have to understand this. We have to realize this. We only have each other in this fight. So, you know, the more united we are, the more we stick together and we focus on that common goal, which is to get rid of the Islamic Republic regime, the stronger we will be. And I think that is, for me and for many Iranians, that's one of the biggest lessons.
You know, we being alone as a community, as you said, or not being able to depend on anybody, any institutions, any governments, is how I started the show, actually. And I wonder if you think, I mean, it seems like we should know this after years, decades, centuries. Do you think we were somehow naive, and that is those of us in the diaspora going into this year and seeing this level of activism around the world and inside Iran, that things would somehow be different in terms of the support we would receive from the superpowers, etc.?
I think many of us, myself included, believe that if we can convince global powers, Western governments, you know, political parties, that our battle and our fight will benefit them, then they will side with us. And I think that is, you know, even though many of us accepted the fact that they don't really care about us or what we're fighting for, but if we can convince them, then maybe they will side with us and maybe they will help us. But when you think about these situations from a political, very selfish point of view, from their eyes, what benefit do they gain? What do they gain? I mean, the regime in Iran is a threat to the Iranian people, and many people across the Middle East. But they're really not a threat to the Western world, to, you know, a political party in Germany, for instance. They actually benefit from this regime being in power. And a lot of people will disagree with me on that. But why would they care? And I mean, thinking about this from a very selfish and not caring about human rights, not caring about the people, this is how a lot of politicians will look at it. This is how a lot of political parties and governments will look at it.
I guess it's a little twee to say, what do they gain? They gain the ability to sleep at night, knowing that they've helped human rights around the world.
Yeah, you know, I think this sounds horrible, but I think most politicians actually don't care. They really don't care. I mean, they use the term human rights just because it sounds nice. It makes them look better, and a lot of times it's helpful for gaining support and you know, becoming popular. But really, in reality, they don't actually care. So that's why I say we have to understand that we really only have each other, and the greatest weapon we have against the Islamic Republic is our unity. And you can sense that whenever we are united, whenever we are together, regardless of our political differences or whatever differences we have, the stronger we are, and the more afraid the regime is. But when we are fighting among each other, when we are not united, when we're not, you know, focusing on what the ultimate goal is, that's when we become weaker. And unfortunately, if it stays like that, then it's going to be very, very difficult to topple this regime.
And what have you learned about that unity over this past year?
Well, for one, I think that we've seen many of the mercenaries of this regime actually infiltrate social media and different places and try to create differences between people, get them to fight among each other. People who should be united, right? So that's definitely one thing to always keep in mind, to realize that this is the goal of the regime, to turn us against each other. So we can't let them do that. You know, I would say, I look at my own political views and what I ultimately see and envision for the future in Iran, and it might be very different from what somebody else who's also a staunch enemy of the Islamic Republic. But, we have differences, but we have to focus on what our mission is. I would spend less time fighting with that person and trying to convince them that my vision is correct for the future. And I would focus my energy on doing what I can to expose this regime and to do what I can to be the voice of the people inside the country, be the voice of Iranian people who are fighting and putting their lives on the line to get rid of this regime, and doing whatever I can to reach that goal, rather than trying to convince somebody else who's an opponent of the Islamic Republic that, hey, listen, what you're saying here or whatever, your political affiliation is not really right, and I'm going to start fighting and arguing with you. I don't think
But you did fight against those who, or you were speaking out against those who you believed or you believe were and are enabling the regime. I mean, it wasn't just governments and corporations. You've been very outspoken about reformists and lobby groups in the West that you felt have enabled and effectively served to support the Iranian regime in recent years. There was an effort to really move past that kind of reformism, and yet, Bahador, it seems like we're on, if we look at things now realistically and honestly, we're on the precipice of a new nuclear deal with the U.S. and Iran. Those same lobby voices seem to be as loud as ever, say, in America. Do you believe much has changed?
No, but the reason I fought against those voices and those groups and those organizations is because their goal is not to get rid of the Islamic Republic regime. That's not their ultimate goal. They talk about reform. They talk about changing things. They talk about, if we just change a few discriminatory laws within the system, everything will be great. This is what they envision. This is what they fight for. So they don't have the same goal. What I'm saying about the fighting between people is people who ultimately want to get rid of this regime,
right? And
they just happen to have certain political differences. I mean, we have that everywhere in the world. Right here in Canada, like about certain policies we may disagree with, but that doesn't mean that we're against one another, right? So that's what I'm referring to, and I think that those groups and those organizations who lobby on behalf of the regime in the United States and Canada and some of them in Europe, some of them probably don't really have a position. They are just after their own interests. They're after money. They're after whatever benefits them, right? So their goal isn't necessarily to get rid of the regime, but it's also not necessarily to keep the regime in power, with some exceptions. Some of them are very much affiliated with that regime, but some of them will just switch sides whenever it suits them, right? So I don't think those groups or those individuals are our allies. Like we have to stick together as people, as true opponents of the Islamic Republic.
Final question to you, a general one, like the general one I started with that I've been asking everybody. If you were to put on your crystal ball, or how do you feel about the state of things inside in Iran and the fight for democracy and freedom in Iran compared to how you felt, say, this time last year, right before the uprising? And are you optimistic about the weeks and months ahead?
I'm definitely optimistic about the future. I'm not going to put a certain date on it, but I'm very optimistic about the future. And I say that because to me, the people of Iran are what dictate the future. And what we see right now with this young generation of Iranians is something that I personally, even myself, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I didn't even think about it this way. I didn't envision this. I have so many relatives that live inside Iran, people who come from very religious conservative families who their parents, their uncles are supporters of this regime. And you have all of these people who are so aware, who are so informed. They're not fooled anymore. There's no question about the fact that the overwhelming majority of Iranians are against this regime. It's just we don't really know the figures. We can't really. I mean, I'm not the type to put a date on when this will happen or when that will happen, but I am very optimistic about the future because of what I see among the young generation of Iranians, especially those under the age of 30.
It's always good to talk to you. Thanks for being part of this special, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much for having me, and same. wish you all the best and امید پیروزی.
مرسی. خداحافظ.
خداحافظ.
This is a special edition of Roqe, The Uprising 1 year later, and my next guest is an Iranian-American political satirist, an actor, a TV, a radio host, an advocate for human rights in Iran. Kambiz Hosseini is the host of Paradox, a Persian political satire show and podcast that airs on Radio Bahador. He also co-created and hosted the very successful TV show Parazit from 2009 to 2012, and has been honored by the Reporters Without Borders for his advocacy of freedom of expression. Kambiz is well known across the global Iranian community as one of the most prominent voices in the diaspora, and right now, Kambiz Hosseini joins us from Los Angeles today. Hello, sir.
Hello, Jian. Happy to be with you. My sound okay? The voice is fine?
Yeah, you sound good. You sound good. It's nice to hear you and see you. Thank you so much for being part of this special.
Thank you for having me.
So let me ask you the general question I'm starting with everybody with is what are you feeling 1 year later? And what lessons do you think we have learned as a global Iranian community in the year after the killing of Mahsa Amini?
I think I have some mixed feeling. The feeling of pride and for the achievement that we had in past year, and disappointment that we couldn't keep it up. So mixed feelings. Yeah, I'm very proud of women inside Iran. Very proud of what happened and how it happened and what we achieved, and very disappointed with oppositions outside of Iran handling the whole situation and the way they did, and not being united as we wished them to be.
Did you personally think things would go differently this year? I remember you and I having a conversation.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
It went differently. It did go differently. I think we left this huge scar on this brutal dictator's face that it's not going to go away, and he's going to go everywhere with that thing on his face. I mean, the scar is there. Right. It was different. It was this.
Well, it's funny that we're different. I mean, I remember this conversation you and I had back in, I think it was probably October of last year. I'm not sure if it was on the air or not, but where you said this time I can feel it in my bones. This time is different, and I think the implication of what you meant is this time they're going to be gone. This time this is not just another Aubon or another student uprising or what.
I always believed throughout the years that I covered all this protest and uprising. Every year there was a reason for it. It was like the gas price at some point. There was an election on 2009 and all that. I always believed if women lead something like this, is going to be different. So this time, that's why day one, when I heard that something like this happened, and then women rose, and I'm like, I told you, this is different. This is going to be different. This is, it's going to make some noise and make some scars, and it did.
When you talk about the disappointment, I feel like that intersects with the question around lessons learned for the global Iranian community. Can you reflect on what you mean by disappointment? I mean, what is it that we should or could do better in the coming months?
It's funny because I'm doing a show this week about this also, that what we learned, what mistakes we made. I think I can't say anything about people inside Iran. But outside of Iran, us, people living outside of Iran, I think we couldn't unite and we brought up our own personal agendas or political opinions that was dear to us in front of what was good for the country. That's a huge source of disappointment for me.
When did that happen? Because it felt like we did unite, and then somehow things got derailed a little bit, as you say, outside the country. What is your analysis of?
Yeah, we were in the beginning, but at the end, basically, we destroyed everything.
and why? What was the turning point?
I'm not a political activist.
No, but,
I'm not.
Well,
I don't know. I mean, you should ask those people that they represented themselves as the representatives of people from different aisles of society, and they were trying to get something done. I'm not part of it. I just know that we don't have a solid political activist within an organization that can push an agenda of removal of this brutal regime.
We don't have one.
We don't have the organization.
One united organization.
I mean, we don't even have one organization that can basically have an organization that has a structure and can have statements and bring people together and take care of people. And we don't have that. We don't have a political
Well, there's
party.
been attempts at that organization, but then people disagree with each other.
Yeah.
Right.
That's another problem. That we have this half-ass organizations that they're trying to do something, and then they cannot sit at one table all together and push people's agenda.
Kambiz, is that balkanization, that division, that disunity that you're talking about, is that fixable?
Of course, because like you said, it's what we learned in the past year. We learned that we should put our differences aside and use opportunities like this in order to, overthrow this government. I think if something like this happened next time, the people who they were leader of the oppositions, or they so-called called themselves the leaders, or whatever they were, they should learn from what happened and all these disappointments and depression that they caused.
Let me ask you about what you hear from. I have this image, this impression of Kambiz Hosseini's life, where you are outside of Iran now, but you've got to be deeply connected to and communicating with a lot of people inside Iran on the basis of the popularity of your show and the interactions in the socials and etc. Tell me about what you've been hearing from Iranians inside Iran, and what would you say has shifted, if anything, in the social and political culture of Iran between a year ago and now?
It did shift a lot, because nowadays, you see a lot of young women not having scarf walking on the street. The values that we were living inside Iran with before this uprising are different values. Now people have different values. Lots of things has changed culturally for us inside Iran. Outside of Iran, we're the same shit, same bullshit, same people trying too much ado for nothing.
Maybe that's a little simplistic. I mean, I feel like
but that's maybe I'm too angry because of what happened, and we couldn't handle it as people, as immigrants or whatever you call them, exiled people. I would say we couldn't carry the torch, and maybe I'm angry because of that. I mean, I'm part of it too, But
the pride you talked about, the rebirth of Iranian pride, I think you correctly, I certainly agree that the genesis or the starting point of that was those young people in Iran, those brave souls, those young women and men who were leading the thing and brought that pride to us outside of Iran that for many years we haven't felt. But I also think that there was a pride, was there not, or is there not, in the feeling of connection when we would, I said this many times over the last year, but even just going on a demonstration here in Toronto with thousands of other people down the center of the city saying, proudly we are Iranians and stuff. I mean, that's something that never happened in my life before, and there was a real pride involved in that. And that I do feel is like a shift in the diaspora as well, albeit hasn't felt that way in more recent months, where it feels like there's been a diminishing of that somehow.
But the time has changed, I mean, you're referring to this one specific period of time that we were very united in Toronto. There was that huge protest in Berlin and all that. But now, I don't think you can gather those people again. With the same kind of feeling that they had before. Something has to happen inside Iran again.
Right.
People paid a lot of price for little achievement that we have so far. But now we're waiting outside of Iran for people inside Iran to go on the street and, pay another huge price again, so we can come out and say this and that, which shouldn't be the case.
That is a dark way to look at it, but I understand what you're saying.
You know what? That's how it's been. People, we have more comforts outside of Iran, our everyday life. For any given person who's living in Toronto, a doctor, a nurse, somebody who came and studied and became somebody, to just leave his job and go on protesting for Iran and doing this and that. So they need an extra cushion to do that. Nobody is like activists by birth. People become activists because of their surroundings.
Yeah, I hear you. That first of all, thank you again for being part of this. I think this is the most serious 12 minutes you and I have ever enjoyed together.
It's really hard for me to be serious with you.
I know myself as well.
No, it's really hard for me to be serious myself, but I tried my best for 10 minutes to just answer your question and be logical about this, because it's important.
I really appreciate that. And as
I hope that you invite me again and I can laugh at your show again. And I can crack jokes and I can get hate mails and stuff.
Right. Unlikely you'll be invited back after this morose performance, but
all right.
You see, we go into then we go into our own
don't take me there, man.
No.
Let's just stick with Mahsa Jina Amini
as
and women life
freedom. As a final question to you, and truly thank you for doing this, brother.
Yes, I'm single. Yes, no, go ahead.
You talked about mixed feelings at the top of this conversation, and I think actually those mixed feelings have been borne out in what you've been saying for the last 10 to 15 minutes. You can hear you kind of going back and forth between.
Yeah, I'm kind of down, man. I'm serious. I shouldn't be. I'm remember you were saying this. I think you were the one who said that us broadcasters, people who chose to do this, they're givers. They should be givers. They give every time they go on air. They give all the time. So they should have some sort of a giving personality. So my job, your job, maybe is to give hope, to give. Oh, it's gonna be better. It's gonna be fine tomorrow. When the sun comes up next day, is on our side, But right now, I'm kind of disappointed, to be honest.
Is that to say you're
I shouldn't be, but I am.
Okay. Well, no, you've articulated that. Is that to say you are not optimistic about the weeks and months ahead for change in Iran?
Iran is changing every day. If you're saying that I'm optimistic that Akhuns are going to be gone tomorrow at 10 a.m., no. But I'm optimistic that with the things going on inside Iran, this generation is learning every day, and they're fighting this brutal regime every day. Because of them and because of what's happening, yes, I'm optimistic. Things are changing every day, even that we don't see it. Like it's not vivid, it's not visible. It's not protest. Nobody's dying on the street. Nobody's getting shot. And you don't have the breaking news media material to say, oh, something is changing.
Right.
But down there, fundamentals are changing. And because of that, I'm very optimistic.
I mean, there's so much I want to continue with you. We've got a bunch of guests waiting.
I know.
I thank you. I really actually appreciate
thank you so much.
Your candor and your perspective. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, brother.
Look forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
This is a special edition of Roqe, the Uprising 1 year later. Let's go to Washington, D.C. now. And a distinguished Iranian-Canadian cartoonist, journalist, and blogger, Nikahang Kowsar is known by many Iranians for his regular presence in media on BBC Persian, Iran International, Radio Faramarz. He also runs a website called abangani-iran.org, which covers Iran's water crisis. He has been deeply involved in exposing environmental issues and discussing democracy in Iran for years. And right now, Nikahang Kowsar joins me from Washington, D.C. Hello, Nikahang.
Hi, Jian.
Nice to have you back on the program. Thanks for being part of this special. You have been tireless when it comes to speaking out and trying to move information over the last year. I know there are so many specific areas you focus on. I spoke to about that in the introduction to you. But as a general question, what are you feeling 1 year later, and what lessons do you think we have learned as a global Iranian community in the year after the killing of Mahsa Amini?
First of all, I'm very sad about the fate of Mahsa and many others who lost their lives, or many who lost an eye in the demonstrations, the ones who were beaten, the ones who were arrested, the ones who actually lost their loved ones as well. And I'm happy that this generation is stepping up and understanding what's at stake. It's their future. And I'm very disappointed in our political parties, if you will, or even groups that showed no responsible leadership and wasted a lot of time. Even they could have helped the activists inside Iran, but they even, unfortunately, because of their infightings, destroyed the momentum. Because a big momentum was being built inside Iran by the activists, by the demonstrators, by those who risked their lives by going to the streets and shouting against and chanting against the regime. But I believe the political fracture of different factions has had its own negative impact on the movement.
I actually appreciate you identifying that, whether I agree with it or not, just because there has been a general positivity to the guests we've had so far. No, things are great. The revolution is continuing. We've learned a lot and we move forward. And I noticed some of those opposition leaders that you were name checking without using names have also been saying the revolution is continuing, etc. And I think it's a fair question to ask: Is it, or was there some steam lost? And if so, why? And obviously, we can't divorce this from the insidious techniques of this regime to maintain its power. But I appreciate that your position is what some would see as more dystopian, what others would see as more realistic.
Look, one thing is that many political activists or leaders, if you will, out of the country do not understand the element of surprise. They should be able to surprise the Iranian regime. And if they want to be leaders, they have to help the people on the ground to actually create more surprises. What's happening now is that the Iranian regime actually knows their algorithms, knows what they're going to say, knows what they're going to do. Because let's face it, many of the members of these groups were once arrested by the regime, and the regime studied these individuals and knows their mindset, knows what they do, what they don't want to do. And the only thing that some of these groups have done is create jobs for Iran's security forces. Some of them are monitoring these groups, know how to handle them, know how to break their plans and create infighting between these people. So I think there was an opportunity for many political groups or individuals to get together and try a new way, try a new path, and actually put some pressure on the Iranian regime. Now you see the Biden administration clearly has another idea because it believes that this regime is going to be there at least for the next few years. And if last year you could feel that they are seeing you could see some hesitation from the Biden administration or other European partners of the United States because they thought something could happen. But I think right now the momentum is lost. Some are hopeful that in the anniversary of Mahsa Amini's unfortunate death, something could possibly happen. But when you make an announcement from months before a certain date and tell the enemy that what you're going to do on the very same date, it's very difficult to expect a different outcome of what happens next. The problem with many Iranian activists and politicians is that they do the same thing, they repeat the same thing, but they expect a different outcome. It doesn't happen like that.
Let me just move you away from the top political levels, the governments and even the political opposition, et cetera, and more to the culture within the Iranian diaspora and how that intersects with whether there can be change in Iran. And this is something that you spoke about a lot this past year, and I want to know if you've seen any change. You were very outspoken about reformists and lobby groups in the West that you felt have enabled and effectively served to support the Iranian regime in recent years. You've also talked about those connected to the regime in Iran who have led double lives in the West in places like Canada. You used the term amphibians, I remember. There was a hope among many that this uprising would unveil a lot of this and act as a corrective. Do you believe much has changed?
Look, some of these lobbyists and amphibians were hiding for a while. They weren't present on social media for a long, long time, but you see them again. They feel very safe these days. I'm not saying that activists should create an unsafe atmosphere for them. No, I mean, these people who supported Rouhani, supported elements of the regime, and were behind people like Hossein Mousavian, who freely goes and speaks at CENTCOM's conference. It's really weird what's happening when you see that a narrative that was being hidden is up again. You feel that these individuals are saying that, okay, the regime is there and we can make money out of the regime, so let's play another, let's bring in another pattern and play based on the new players, the new positions, and see what's going to happen. So I think there are people that what we call the oil mafia, those people are back in business again. They are trying to find ways to sell Iran's oil to different markets. And my colleagues are working on different files right now in Europe that shows how corrupt this system, the Islamic Republic, is, but it has partners in the West. And it cannot exist without that partnership. And that's what saddens me.
As a final question to you, and taking in everything you've just said and your critical look at where the uprising has sort of gone over the last year and the loss of opportunity and the loss of steam, if you will, of the revolution, there's a fair argument to make to say there has been some headway. That's what some are saying. Look, you can't expect to have it all at once, and people are learning, and there's a learning curve, and there's been headway, and this was a big step forward. So, as a final question, this time last year, if you can think back to this time last year, before the killing of Mahsa Amini, a few days before, and before, in fact, the uprising that caught much of the world, if not some Iranians by surprise in terms of the growth and the numbers of it and the power of it. Do you feel like you have a more optimistic feeling about the state of the fight for democracy and freedom in Iran today compared to where you were a year ago?
Yes, I do. And I believe that in the last year, many Iranians learned more about the environmental disasters that have occurred in Iran, not because of climate change, but because of the bad management and bad governance of Iranian officials. And some are now learning that if we want to continue as we were in the past decades or so, there will be nothing left for future generations. So to save future generations from a devastating fate, some people are more active these days, especially some environmental activists. Though the regime is being very harsh on environmental activists and arrested a number of them a few days ago in Kurdistan, but still some of them are trying to spread the word and enlighten the public about what's happening and what will happen if we do nothing. Now we know that what's going to happen to Lake Urmia. We know what's going to happen to Gulf Khuni. We know all the land subsidence around the country and the mass migration that will follow. We've had migrations all these years, but we'll have a mass migration. And in the near future, many people who didn't fight for the future of their children will have no option but to move from where they live to places that have more water. But that won't be a sustainable solution. So I guess some people believe that they have to do something today.
And that's a difference from where we were at a year ago. Nikahang, Kowsar, it's always an education and a revelation and an interesting conversation when you're on the program. Thanks for doing this. And
my pleasure.
Look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks for this.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
This is a special edition of Roqe, the Uprising, 1 year later. And let's go back to Los Angeles now. And an acclaimed Iranian dancer and choreographer who's no shy actor when it comes to being outspoken about the situation in Iran. Since the killing of Mahsa Amini, Kowsar Abbasi has been regularly involved as an activist, a creative force, a dance choreographer in various venues, including theatrical performances dedicated to the uprising. And right now, Kowsar Abbasi joins me from Los Angeles. Hello, Kowsar Jan. How are you?
Hi, Jian. How are you? I'm good. And thanks for having me again on this amazing radio show.
Well, thanks for being part of this special. It's an important to have your voice. Let me just start with the general question I've put to everybody throughout this program. What are you feeling 1 year later? And along with that, what lessons do you think we have learned as a global Iranian community in the year after the killing of Mahsa Amini?
This is an amazing question because I keep thinking, like, my mind is every day is busy that me as an individual Iranian, what do I have to learn and how we can help each other to really overcome this horrible situation. The first thing I learn about ourselves is that we are truly, really emotional human beings as Iranian. And we all have our own opinion and mindset, and it's very difficult for us to follow anybody. And what I have learned about myself and people around me, and the more we go and hear the news and people who are active, we don't hear each other.
Hmm.
We just want to convince other people about how I think. We don't hear each other. We cannot stand each other with absolutely opposite opinion. And I think that's where we suffer a lot. And that's why other countries are getting advantage of this attitude and behavior that we have. We cannot be united. I was heartbroken. When that unity of our top people got broken. As we say in Farsi, ye dast sada nadare. We need more hands to clap together to make a bigger noise and movement.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing that I learned, which I'm really upset and angry, is like, seriously, the country like US government and some of the European government, they really don't want the Islamic Republic to go and be changed. Honestly, when the Biden's wife, the first lady of US, gave the award to the Baraye song,
Shavin, yeah.
I was not happy. It didn't make me happy. I was like, oh my God, they are giving us some chocolates to make our mouth a little sweet, and then they're going to show us later. And when Biden threw that Nowruz party and some of our artists went there, if I was the artist, I would ask him to remove this Nowruz. We don't want Nowruz right now.
Yeah.
Come and make some action. And he waited all the way to reach to the year of anniversary and give all these millions of dollars to the Islamic Republic. This is really, now we know it's not only about us. Now we know we don't have just Islamic Republic as the enemy. The US government proved that is our enemy.
That's a similar message to how I started the show today. And these two things that you've identified have actually been the spine of many of the conversations throughout this program. So it's a great epilogue. It's important to have you here throughout these conversations, reiterating what we've heard. Let me take them one at a time. On the unity thing,
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, you almost told a tale of two ends of this year. The beginning where felt like there was a lot of unity, and the last few months where it feels like some of that has fallen away, and the excitement of that feeling as a global Iranian community, and then the heartbreak of seeing it seemingly disappear. And I think about you being in Los Angeles, and Los Angeles tends to be, from my experience and talking to people over the last year, an epicenter of unity or disunity, depending on who you ask, when it comes to the large Iranian base there. What are we? So what do you talked about? You said on a personal level, I've learned this. What talk about yourself? What have you learned about how you're going to interact with others that may agree with you that they want change in Iran, but have a different view about who their leader should be or how they want to go about this?
Honestly, I realized that even myself is not. I'm a really open-minded person in my own opinion, but I realize even there are, as we spoke before, there are cars that even I cannot accept. It's not only about others, me as an Iranian as well. I'm not open to accept all different opinions, which is absolutely against my living style. But I am really trying hard. Before I used to argue. Now I don't argue. When someone tells me something which it doesn't make sense to me, I accept. Because I sit down, I keep quiet, for 5 seconds, I breathe. I'm like, that's how they think. If we are fighting for freedom, that means they have the freedom to have their own opinion. So till the time we don't understand what the meaning of freedom is, the roots of freedom, I think that's what I have to learn. Freedom is not just being a free woman, dance and do whatever you want. Freedom is that when you learn to give freedom to others as well. That's my practice now.
That's quite profound. Yeah. On the second point about feeling isolated, realizing that we're alone, or that the people are not going to come and save us, that this is up to Iranians. If there's a general tone I'm noticing from you of disappointment in terms of the way you're feeling about the way the community has dealt with things in recent months, if I were to say this time last year compared to now, I mean, do you believe that we have progressed. I mean, there are people who've been on this program today who've said, look, this is a step-by-step thing. You can't expect everything too quickly, and progress has been made. Do you believe that? Do you believe that we're in a different place today than we were a year ago, or do you think it's foolish to fool ourselves into thinking that there's been major shifts when seemingly the government in Iran and the system there doesn't seem like it's falling anytime soon?
For sure, I can see the change. I can see the change in people. I can see the change in, of course, my parents are in Iran. When I talk to them, they also feel changes among their own small communities.
Like what?
Before, going out for Muharram was fun for everybody. But this year, the streets were empty. Even I know, like my mom was telling me, even we have a lot of religious people around us, which they didn't go for it. They say this is not how the religion should be presented. This is not how our religion treats others. So apparently, even those who believe in Islam in Iran, now they are against the Islamic Republic and they do not attend their programs or ceremonies. Till before 2 years, 3 years ago, the streets were packed at this time. So this is a good sign. This is a good sign.
And what about you personally, in terms of you? It feels like you've invested a lot of yourself in the last year, not just, as I mentioned in the introduction, not just being on demonstrations and coming on programs like this or in social media, but I know you put a lot of effort in your creative work into this, and you've just recorded with Mahsa Amini and a few others a video in which you're dancing in it that's dedicated to Mahsa Amini. Do you see those two worlds being intertwined, your activism and your creative work for the foreseeable future?
Sure. As an artist, I feel responsible to dedicate my art, not because I am from Iran, not because of Iranian people only, or not because my parents, and because I am an Iranian woman. I pay the price of being an Iranian woman. We all have paid that price, big time. Each one of us has paid price in a different ways. I have not been able to celebrate anything with my loved ones only because I'm an Iranian woman. So before everything else, I'm doing it for myself. I'm doing it for myself, for my heart, for my soul, for my being. I want to go back to Iran. I want to go and dance there. I want to go celebrate with my people. I miss Iran. So my heart is there. My heartbeat is for Iran. So when I do anything, I do it to, calm myself. And I'm hoping that it puts some more impact. And I wish that I know what else I can do. Of course, other than art, I help if we can, gather some money to help some people there, we do. But I really, at this time, I don't know what we can do more. How can we deal with the governments? I feel a little, hopeless in that. What's the next move that I can do at this moment?
I appreciate that. I always appreciate your candor. I appreciate your art, and I appreciate your passion. Thank you so much for taking the time today and being part of this special. Thanks, Mahsa Jina.
Thank you so much for doing this, Jian.
Bye-bye.
It's a bittersweet symphony that's life, trying to make ends meet. You're a slave to money, then you die. I'll take you down.
This is a Roqe special edition, the Uprising 1 year later. Let's come back here to Toronto and a guest we've had on a few times, known for his candor and his eloquence. Javid Jabari is the founder of Persian Drag Show. He's not only an LGBTQ activist, but has dedicated years to raising awareness and combating homophobia within the Iranian community. And right now, Javid Jabari joins me from Toronto. Hi, Javid Jan.
Hi, Jian. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for doing this and being part of this special. I know this was a hard year for you and a year in which you put a lot of energy into activism. Let me ask you the general question I've asked everybody on the program so far. What are you feeling 1 year later? And what lessons do you think we have learned as a global Iranian community in the year after the killing of Mahsa Amini?
It's different every single day because you hear different news from Iran, right? So it's like a roller coaster to me. But what I have learned is it's not only for me, for most of the Iranians. I think we have learned that first of all, the regime that we have in Iran is beneficial for lots of other governments around the world. So we cannot accept them to be a voice for us or do something for us, because what's going on in Iran, it's beneficial for them. And also, I think as the Iranian community outside of Iran, we have learned that instead of focusing on what makes us different from each other, if we focus on what we have in common, we can do huge things that the Islamic Republic doesn't want us to do.
How good a job do you think we've done on focusing on the things we have in common?
It's a work in progress, right? So it's not going to happen overnight. It takes time for sure. But when I compare what I felt like when I was in the middle of people in the demonstration in Toronto, yes, but what I feel right now, it's so different. And I feel like I'm more, as a LGBTQ member, I'm more belong to this community. I don't feel as much as I felt like I'm an outsider.
First of all, that's great to hear. That's something that's a segue into something I was going to ask you. I mean, there is an expectation, maybe it was a fleeting hope, that this uprising saw the Iranian community, or at least so far has seen the Iranian community make major steps towards understanding change and understanding each other. And I wanted to ask you, do you feel like, based on the massive, in many cases, unified demonstrations that we've had for human rights, do you feel like we've made headway as a community when it comes to, for example, homophobia? Or is there little difference from this time last year?
It's with Persian community, it's a little bit tricky, right? Especially when we are talking about LGBT community. As I said, it's not going to happen over the night, but it's a work in progress. And what I see now is getting better and better every single time that we are in with Persian people, at least here in Toronto.
If I may, I feel like there was more visibility than ever before of the LGBTQ community within the Iranian community, and those demonstrations that we saw over the last year, not just in Toronto, but from what you would see around the world. Do you believe that's true?
I think so, yes. Yeah, and that's because, first of all, many thanks to the people like you who included us to their programs, and that caused people seeing us and being like, oh, they're just people with different beliefs.
What do you hear from people inside Iran, maybe those within the LGBTQ community, in terms of how that visibility has affected them inside Iran?
They are very proud of the LGBT community outside of Iran, because we are kind of breaking that silent moment for the Iranian LGBT community finally. And for sure, when they see us being ourselves around Persian people or Iranian people, they feel like, oh, now we can be ourselves too. It's so different for them, right? It's not easy for someone to to show up and be like, oh, I'm gay. I'm like, for sure, it's not easy to do something like this in Iran. But when they see that we do it outside of Iran, we are basically giving them a perspective from what we can have in the future in a free Iran.
A final question to you. I mean, if you think back to this time last year, so this would be right before the killing of Mahsa Amini, and you're no stranger to the nature of this regime in Iran. In fact, you fled this regime in Iran because you couldn't be who you are in that country. But things definitely changed in terms of the outpouring of the nature and the volume and the size of this uprising that we saw in the days, weeks, and months after the killing of Mahsa. How do you feel about the state of things in Iran and the fight for democracy and freedom compared to how you would have felt at this time or this moment last year? Are you optimistic about the weeks and months ahead?
You know, about the weeks and the months ahead, that we have no control on what's going to happen in Iran, right? Because we are outside of Iran. All we can do is just wait and see what the people inside of Iran decide to do, right? And when I compare last year with this year, for the very first thing that comes to my mind is I started to feel like that Iranian community can get together and have each other's back right now. Before that, before last year, I was always struggling with this, kind of, I don't know what to call it, but Persian people, they kind of like, I don't want to use the word hate, but they were not very supportive about each other. Right. For example, what we see in the Afghanistan, the community, or how they have each other's back, we were missing that in Iranian community, right, outside of Iran. But right now, I see that lots of people started to be like, oh, we should have each other's back, because the only thing that we have in this movement is each other.
Beautifully said. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. It's always great to hear your perspective. Thank you, and hope to see you soon. Merci, Azadeh.
No worries.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This is a special edition of Roqe, The Uprising 1 year later. And let's come back to Toronto here. And our next guest is an Iranian-Canadian writer, actor, voiceover artist. She regularly serves as a host and moderator at high-profile Iranian events and festivals in Canada as well. Banafsheh Tahirian has been actively engaged and outspoken on social media and during demonstrations since the beginning of the uprising of the last year. She's the host of a podcast called Chai with Banafsheh. And right now, Banafsheh Tahirian joins me from Toronto. Hello, Banafsheh Jan.
Hi, Jian.
Nice
Hello to you and all your listeners.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on the program and as part of this special. Thanks for doing it.
Thank you.
This year was a very personal, very hard, very inspired one for you. All of those things. You came out publicly with some details about how you've been treated as a woman in Iran, things you hadn't spoke about before, how you identified with Mahsa Amini and others. Let me ask you the question I've been asking everybody on this program. What are you feeling 1 year later now? And what lessons do you think we have learned as a global Iranian community, if any, in the year after the killing of Mahsa Amini?
I believe that we learned a lot, and we still have a lot to learn. Firstly, I think we learned that unity is our greatest strength. Being together makes us so much stronger. By standing together, we became a force that cannot be ignored. I believe that people in Iran, I always say that people in Iran are on the front lines, and we immigrants, the Iranian community in the diaspora, should support and amplify their voices and not let other governments forget and move on. Our worldwide protests prove that we can catch everyone's attention. And I also learned that we must continuously remember and pay attention to what is happening as much as we can. Every time someone forgets, another victim will be added to the long list of innocent people who have been killed by this brutal regime. I learned that if I forget that I was whipped, another girl will be killed in the sky or on the street. We must remember what we have been through and transform this pain and suffocation into strength that fuels our fight for democracy and freedom. Another thing I learned is that woman, life, freedom is a distinct and powerful slogan, but we need to learn more about the true meaning of this saying. I mention in each episode of my podcast to remind my listeners that these three words are a reminder for all of us to search, to delve deeper into the true essence of these words and apply their meaning in our daily lives. The other thing I learned is exactly how much we need to study our history so we do not our past mistakes. Iran's revolution is a renaissance, and it will not happen overnight. It is crucial to understand that it is a process that requires patience and everyone's contribution. In the beginning, young generation like Gen Z, I think started this movement, but now I think every day it is getting more mature. But as I said, we still have a lot to learn. Maybe we feel that it's getting slower, a bit slower than before, but I have faith, and I think that I'm very optimistic that we are moving forward. I don't think that we will get back to where we were once.
Let me ask you about a couple of things you've said there. One, in terms of, you said we should not forget, basically you were saying we should not forget our own stories, the way we or our family members or our friends in Iran have been treated. And you talked about, and I said in the introduction to you about how this was a year in which you very much came out talking about your own story. And I'm thinking about how you're talking about those young women and men on the front lines in Iran of this, of trying to affect change. And isn't it interesting how they inspired us in the diaspora? In other words, the young people in Iran inspired you in Toronto to come out and tell your own story. Would that be correct?
Exactly, that's correct. Like the night that the first time that I saw dear Mahsa Jina's picture in the hospital, I felt like it was on me. It was my responsibility to tell my story. I tried for many years to forget what happened to me and to hide it and to not talk about it. But see what happens some years after that. And now I believe that we should remember every day. We should remind everyone to do not forget, because I believe that if we forget, we will lose everything.
You mentioned the importance, one of the lessons, one of the takeaways for you is the importance of togetherness, of how powerful we are when we're unified. How do you assess, how good a job do you think Iranians have done around the world of unity in the last year?
It was really beautiful. Last year, you remember that at Richmond Hill, we gathered, we were more than 50,000 people, and it was beautiful. For the first time, I felt that, I felt unity. it wasn't matter who believes in what, we all were there. We wanted that change, and we were together, and that was beautiful. That was strong. And yeah, many things happened, and this is how this regime works, like divide us. They want to divide us, and we are learning still, but I think that we are moving forward. We again, like I'm really hopeful that we will be together again, and we will make that beautiful unity again, and we will show the world that we are together.
You didn't start being someone who cared about Iran and human rights and being a proud Iranian woman this year, this past year. Yet, if I ask you this time last year compared to this time now, how do you feel about the state of things and the fight for democracy and freedom in Iran compared to how you would have felt 1 year ago?
Like 1 year ago, I felt that, like everyone, we thought that the regime is falling quickly. But I learned this now, that this fight is a longer fight than we were expecting. And the way people are fighting is changing every day. One of my friends was saying that this is an innovational fight run mostly by the youngest generation in Iran. But we can learn from them. And I think that I understand that all the people are worried about what happens the day after revolution, and they need assurance. Yes, we should get to that point, but I think people may choose different ways to stand up. If we want change, we have to find our way. We have to choose our way to stand up. And I, as an artist, have to decide what I want to do for this, and I pay my share. And I think that government is scared of people right now, and it is crucial to hold on to hope, and because I think it plays a vital role in shaping our future. We must stay together. We must stay strong, and all of us, we have to tell our stories. And I feel the change is inevitable, but we all, everyone, should be part of it. I think, I don't know.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I'm so,
Thank you so much.
Glad to have you as part of the special. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
This is a special edition of Roqe, episode 286, The Uprising, 1 year later. Finally today, a very special guest. It's always an honor to have him on the show. A renowned Iranian-Canadian guitarist, a composer, a musician, Babak Amini is a member of the American Guitar Society and a major star as a musical virtuoso in the global Iranian community. He has not only made significant contributions to the Iranian music industry, but has also been an outspoken advocate for human rights in Iran. Now, we're about to premiere a brand new recording he has made for this anniversary occasion of the uprising. But first, right now, Babak Amini joins me from Toronto. Hi, Babak John.
Hi, my brother, and hello, everybody.
Nice to have you as part of this special, brother. I will not forget.
Thanks for having me.
Well, of course. I will not forget sitting with you back in November and having you tell me that you could not practice or play your guitar for the first time in your adult life because you felt so paralyzed by the situation in Iran and the kids being killed, etc. We are now 1 year removed from the outrageous killing of Mahsa. What are you feeling 1 year later, and what lessons do you think we have learned as a global Iranian community?
The impact was so intense and hard. So that's why I couldn't practice or play. And after that, I find out that I can express my feelings through the songs that I'm making for our people, for the movement. And I don't remember any time that I wrote or I arranged that many songs, like political songs, or to support the Mahsa movement, women life freedom movement. And that I put together lots of concerts and lots of programs. And so I channeled all my energy through that somehow.
And how do you feel about the state of things 1 year later? How do you feel about what we have learned over the last year, positive or negative, in terms of the fight for?
I think everything was positive because we're still in learning process, and we still need to educate ourselves about how to continue this movement, and we've learned so many beautiful things. The first thing is nobody is supporting us except our own people. We don't have to wait for the different countries.
And that's a beautiful thing? You think that's a positive thing?
Yes, it's beautiful. We just only we can support each other. We have to think about only Iranian people in Iran and outside Iran. We can be united and we can move mountains. We don't need to wait for America or Europe or Canada to help this movement. They have lots of different economic crisis and war in Ukraine. So many different things is happening in the world. Basically, it's a war 3 right now. We are experiencing crisis everywhere. And so nobody's paying attention to Mahsa Amini movement, women life freedom movement in Iran. They have their own problems.
But it's so refreshing, or very different, to hear that talked about or spun as something positive. I mean, most people, including me at the top of today's show, talk about this as none of these people are going to help us. We've learned again, we're alone as Iranians. The way you're presenting this as a beautiful thing is very interesting.
Yes, it's beautiful because that united us more, and we get stronger and stronger, because so many people might think, okay, we have to go through US. Okay, no, so many people, they think that we have to go through China to get support. It's we don't have to go through any countries, man. It's just Iranians and Iranians outside and inside Iran. That's it.
So Babak Jan, when you say it's all positive,
yes,
what do you say to someone? Let me play devil's advocate, or at least assert the other side, or somebody, although the other side being still somebody who wants to see the end of this regime or change in Iran. What do you say to somebody who says, listen, last October and November, we had all these dreams. It felt like we were united. It felt like there were millions in the streets. Now that is dissipated. The regime is still in power. They've incarcerated all these people.
Yes.
They're making a nuclear deal with the U.S. It doesn't feel like the change has come. How do you respond to that when you say all of it's been positive?
I think we were not united the way that we supposed to be last year, and we learn our lessons. So many mistakes has made through different parties, and I think now we can see clearly the future. It's just only one thing: to be united and just think about change. And after that, the people are voting to see and to basically have their future through voting, not before that.
What have you personally, I mean, you've been well known in the Iranian community for a long time, so knowing about issues of unity or disunity within our community is not new to you. But what have you learned about how we can be more unified after you've seen those squabbles between different opposition groups and different, ways in which the uprising went outside of Iran? This is in recent months. What have you learned about how we can achieve that unity?
Yeah, because before we move, we think about all the details, and we have all the fights because of those details. I want other things in the details, you want other things. So that causes just to stay in our seats and do nothing. But we can leave the details after the voting. First, we need to move and do the change, and then we can talk about the details.
Final question to you. I was going to ask you how your feelings about the state of the fight for democracy and freedom in Iran are today compared to 1 year ago, before the killing of Mahsa, before the uprising. But I feel like I don't need to. I feel like the sense I'm getting from you is that you sound, first of all, you sound positive, obviously, but you also sound inspired. You sound energized.
Oh yeah.
Tell me about that.
See, just think about the hijab right now in Iran. Man, the mullahs lost it. And all the girls, they won the battle. Little by little, step by step, we are going forward. You cannot take it from the people. We cannot go back, man.
It's a very empowering perspective.
And of course, it's just the little steps, it's a baby steps, but we are going forward, man. Just see how many beautiful songs everybody wrote.
Before we end this show today, we are premiering, as I said at the beginning of the show, a brand new piece that you've been involved in. Just very quickly, tell us a bit about this and we'll play it.
Yeah, basically it's the song Baraye that Shervin Hajipur wrote the song, and I was thinking that this has beautiful lyrics, and the way that he was singing in that video was so simple and organic, and I was thinking I need to do something about this, and I need to add something to it. So basically I did the orchestration for that song, and I changed it the way that I liked it. I added to the harmonies, and I wrote for the live orchestra, and we changed the lyrics to Italian. So, and I sent it to Andrea Bocelli, but I supposed to go there April 9 and April 11 to perform on stage, and I supposed to give all the charge to the big orchestra to play it on stage with the maestro. But so many different things happens, and lots of complications, and after that I didn't have the work permit to go there, and so basically we changed it. I asked a beautiful singer here, Daniel is a beautiful tenor, and he did a great vocals and in Italian. So hope everybody likes it. Actually, Andrea Bocelli heard this song and he said he's a great, powerful singer.
It's an honor to get to premiere it on our program. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for letting us play it, and thank you for participating in this special. As always, it's always great to talk to you, sir.
Oh, likewise, brother. Thank you so much.
Take care. See you soon.
Yes.
Bye-bye. Here it is. The global premiere of a new recording arranged and orchestrated by Mahsa Jina Amini. Music by Shervin Hajipur, of course, Baraye. This with the vocalist Daniel Pineda.
Per ballare in strada per la paura di un bacio per mia sorella, tua sorella, per la nostra sorella, per cambiare le vecchie credenze, per la vergogna della povertà, per desiderio, per una vita normale, per i sogni dei bambini che cercano il pane, per questa economia dittatoriale, per il veleno nell'aria, le strade con gli alberi in morrentà, gli animali che vengono portati vai, i cani che non hanno fatto nulla di male, per le lacrime infinite, per questa immagine che non finisce mai, per un viso sorridente, per gli studi, per il futuro, per le richieste dentari in paradiso, le belle menti in prigione, per una vita migliori per bambini afghani, per evitare che tutto ciò si ripeta, per frasi vuote, case che cadono a terra, per la serenità, per il sole che sorge dopo lunghe notti, per la medicina dell'insonnia e l'ansia, per la ragazza che desiderava essere ragazzo, per la donna, per la vita, per la libertà, per la libertà, per la libertà, per la libertà.
There it is, the global premiere of the new version of Bahador, the great song by Shervin Hajipour, this time arranged and orchestrated by the great Mahsa Jina Amini. That is a global premiere, and that features the vocals of Daniel Pineda. Thank you so much to Mahsa Jina Amini for allowing us to premiere that new song, that new recording here on Roqe. He says he's going to release it everywhere in the coming days. This is full time for Roqe for today. Wow, what a show. Our season launch. Thank you to all of the guests who agreed to appear on this anniversary, this Uprising 1 year later program. Remember, for all things Roqe related, for all of our previous episodes, all of our different programming, any information about us, to get in touch with how you can support us, roqemedia.com. roqemedia.com is our website. Thanks to the amazing team who put this show together, particularly this big opus of a show, Smart Pega, Super Parisa, Talented Anahita, Savvy Rojhan, Methodical Kaveh, Bearded Omid, and sound person Luis. Thank you to all of you out there for supporting us, for sharing our content, for subscribing on any or all of our platforms. Find me on Instagram at Jian Gomeshi, Mizun Bashi.